The janitor's mop clattered to the marble floor the moment he heard the trap closing. Through the glass conference room wall, a young woman sat surrounded by predators in tailored suits, seconds away from signing her company into oblivion. Nobody understood the Mandarin threats hidden beneath polite smiles. Nobody heard the Russian coded inside formal greetings. Nobody except the exhausted single father who'd spent years surviving in languages the elite never bothered learning. He should have walked away, kept his head down, protected the fragile life he'd built for his daughter. But her voice cracked, and something inside Caleb Ward finally broke. If you're watching from anywhere in the world, drop your city in the comments below. I want to see how far this story travels. And if this opening hooked you, hit that like button and stick around until the end. Caleb Ward's knees hurt. Not the sharp kind of pain that made you stop working, the dull, persistent ache that reminded you exactly how long you'd been scrubbing other people's messes off expensive floors. 32 years old, and his body already felt 50. He pushed his cleaning cart past the 63rd floor reception desk, wheels squeaking against polished marble that probably cost more per square foot than his entire month's rent. The building directory listed the floor tenants in subtle gold lettering: Bennett Global Enterprises Executive Offices. Caleb had cleaned this floor 3 nights a week for 7 months and never once met anyone who worked here. The executives cleared out by 6. The janitors arrived at 8. 2 worlds occupying the same space, never touching. Tonight felt different, though. Lights still blazed inside the main conference room. Voices carried through the heavy glass walls. Not the usual post-meeting chatter, but something tense, urgent. Caleb's phone buzzed. Sophie's babysitter. "She's asking for you. Won't go to sleep." He typed back quickly. "Tell her I'll call in 10 minutes. Reading her the dragon story. His daughter, 6 years old. The only reason he survived each exhausting day. Sophie had his late wife's smile, her stubborn optimism, her ability to find joy in things that shouldn't matter. Dandelions growing through sidewalk cracks, pigeons fighting over breadcrumbs. The way rain sounded different on their apartment's fire escape depending on the season. Caleb tucked his phone away and grabbed the trash bin from his cart. The conference room would have to wait. He'd empty the side offices first, give whoever was in there time to finish their meeting and leave. The last thing he needed was complaints about janitors interrupting important business. But as he moved down the hallway, a woman's voice cut through the ambient hum of the building's ventilation system. "I don't understand. The terms we discussed yesterday were completely different." Young, strained, trying hard to sound confident and failing. Caleb told himself to keep walking. Not your problem, not your world. He made it 3 steps before he heard the response. Smooth, patronizing, spoken in lightly accented English that probably charmed investors at every cocktail party. "Ms. Bennett, perhaps you misunderstood the original proposal. Translation issues happen frequently in international negotiations. This is why we have legal teams." Something in the man's tone made Caleb's jaw tighten. He'd heard that exact cadence before. Jakarta, São Paulo. A shipping warehouse outside Athens, where Caleb had spent 6 months loading containers while running from memories he couldn't escape. Men who smiled while lying spoke in that particular register, friendly enough to seem trustworthy, condescending enough to make you doubt your own memory. Against every instinct screaming at him to mind his own business, Caleb glanced toward the conference room. Through the glass wall, he counted 8 people around a massive table. 6 men in suits that probably cost more than Caleb earned in 3 months. 1 woman in her late 20s sitting very straight, hands folded on top of a stack of documents. And 1 older man in a rumpled blazer, looking uncomfortable and slightly confused. The woman, Ms. Bennett, apparently, had dark hair pulled back severely, the kind of hairstyle designed to make people take you seriously when you're young and trying to command rooms full of men twice your age. Expensive watch, good posture. But her eyes gave her away. She looked exhausted, overwhelmed, terrified. "My father built this company on transparency," she said, voice steady despite the tension in her shoulders. "Before we proceed, I need clarification on sections 4 and 7. The language doesn't match what we... Your father, God rest his soul, understood that business requires flexibility." Different voice now, deeper. European accent Caleb couldn't immediately place. "You are very young, Ms. Bennett. Very intelligent, yes, but inexperienced in these complex international arrangements. Trust the process." Caleb's hand tightened on the trash bin. He should leave. Right now. Whatever was happening in that room had nothing to do with him. But he didn't leave. Instead, he moved closer, positioning himself near a recycling station that gave him a clear view through the glass while appearing to work. The man who'd just spoken leaned back in his chair, mid-50s, expensive suit, the kind of face that looked trustworthy in photographs. He said something to the woman in what Caleb's brain immediately registered as Mandarin, formal, polite. The woman smiled uncertainly and nodded, clearly not understanding. That's when Caleb's pulse spiked. The man had just told his colleague, in flawless Mandarin, "The girl has no idea what she's signing. Her interpreter is useless. By tomorrow morning, we'll control the voting shares." The colleague, younger, sharper features, Korean maybe, responded in equally perfect Mandarin. "And the oversight committee? Already bribed. This company is ours." They both smiled at Ms. Bennett. She smiled back, probably thinking they were discussing something routine. Caleb's mind raced. He'd picked up Mandarin during 8 months working at a manufacturing plant in Shenzhen, back when he'd been running from grief so overwhelming he'd have taken any job that put an ocean between him and his memories. The managers had assumed the American loading dock worker couldn't understand their conversations. They'd been wrong. He looked at the woman again. Mid to late 20s, inheriting a company she was clearly trying desperately to save, surrounded by predators. "Not your problem," he reminded himself. "You have a daughter depending on you, a job that pays rent. You cannot afford to get involved in whatever corporate nightmare is unfolding in that conference room." But then Ms. Bennett's hand trembled as she reached for her water glass. That small, involuntary gesture of fear cracked something open inside Caleb's chest. He'd spent the last 4 years trying to disappear. After his wife Emma died, car accident, sudden, the kind of tragedy that reshapes reality in a single instant, Caleb had drifted, lost. Countries blurred together, jobs came and went. He'd learned languages because knowing what people were really saying sometimes meant the difference between getting paid and getting robbed, between safe work and dangerous desperation. He'd landed back in New York 8 months ago, broken, with a 6-year-old daughter who barely remembered the father who'd vanished into grief. Getting the janitorial job at this building had felt like winning the lottery. Stable hours, decent pay, health insurance for Sophie. He couldn't risk losing it. He absolutely could not risk losing it. "Ms. Bennett, if you'll just sign page 12, the trustworthy-looking man said in English, sliding a document across the table. "This finalizes the merger agreement. Your father would be very proud." The woman picked up the pen. Caleb watched her hand hover over the signature line. "Do not get involved. Do not." But his legs were already moving. His hand was already pushing the conference room door open. And his voice, unused to addressing people who weren't 6 years old or telling him which floors needed attention, sounded strange in his own ears. "Excuse me, sorry to interrupt." 8 heads turned. 8 pairs of eyes registered the janitor standing in the doorway, still wearing his work gloves, ID badge dangling from a lanyard against his faded blue uniform. The trustworthy-looking man's expression shifted through confusion, irritation, and landed on cold dismissal. "The meeting is private. Please leave." Caleb's heart hammered. His mouth went dry. But he looked at the woman, Ms. Bennett, and saw Emma in her face. Not physically. Emma had been blonde, freckled, laughed too loud at terrible jokes. But that look, that moment of drowning while everyone around you pretended the water was fine. "You're about to sign a document you don't understand," Caleb said quietly. "The merger agreement isn't what they told you it is." Silence dropped over the room like a physical weight. "Security." The man didn't raise his voice. Didn't have to. Authority oozed from every syllable. "Remove this man immediately." But Miss Bennett held up one hand. Her eyes locked onto Caleb's face, searching for something. "Wait, what do you mean?" "I mean, these gentlemen have been discussing in Mandarin how they're going to take control of your company the moment you sign that contract. The interpreter they provided," Caleb gestured toward the uncomfortable man in the rumpled blazer, "either doesn't understand business Mandarin or is deliberately mistranslating." The room erupted. "This is absurd. How dare you?" "Miss Bennett, this man is clearly—" But the woman raised her voice, cutting through the chaos. "What exactly did they say?" Caleb's brain screamed at him to walk out right now, before security arrived, before this got worse. But something in her face, the desperate hope fighting against practiced skepticism, pushed him forward. The gentleman to your left told his colleague that you have no idea what you're signing, that your interpreter is useless, that by tomorrow morning they'll control the voting shares. His colleague asked about the oversight committee. He said they'd already bribed them. Caleb paused. He said, and I'm translating directly, this company is ours. The trustworthy-looking man stood slowly. His smile never wavered, but something dangerous flickered behind his eyes. Ms. Bennett, this is clearly a disturbed individual who has wandered. Repeat what you just said, she interrupted, looking at Caleb. In Mandarin, exactly as you heard it. Caleb's Mandarin was rough, accented, picked up from factory workers and dock supervisors, not textbooks. But he repeated the conversation word for word, matching the tones as closely as his memory allowed. The color drained from the trustworthy-looking man's face. The woman's eyes went wide. She looked at her interpreter, who'd gone very pale and very still. Then back to Caleb. Who are you? Nobody. The word came out hoarse. I clean the offices. I heard them talking and I thought. He stopped. What had he thought? That he could walk into a room full of billionaires and executives and change anything, that his intervention would matter? What's your name? Caleb Ward. Mr. Ward, do you speak any other languages? Some, enough to get by. How many is some? He hesitated. This was already surreal. Might as well finish burying himself. 8. Maybe 9 if you count Portuguese and Brazilian Portuguese separately. Her eyebrows rose. You speak 8 languages and you work as a janitor? The question stung more than it should have. Caleb's jaw tightened. I have a daughter to feed. This job has health insurance. For a long moment, Ms. Bennett just looked at him. Then she turned to the men around the table and her voice went cold in a way that made Caleb reassess his initial read of her as overwhelmed and inexperienced. Gentlemen, this meeting is over. I'll be conducting an independent audit of the merger documents before proceeding. You'll hear from my attorneys. Ms. Bennett, please be reasonable. Get out! Not loud, but absolute. All of you, now. They left, their outrage barely contained, shooting venomous looks at Caleb as they filed past him. The interpreter scurried out last, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Then it was just Caleb and the young woman in the enormous conference room, separated by a table that probably cost more than his car. She sank back into her chair and covered her face with both hands. Her shoulders shook. Caleb stood frozen, unsure whether she was crying or laughing or having some kind of breakdown. He should leave. Right now. Before security showed up. Before he got fired for... Thank you. Her voice was muffled behind her palms. She lowered her hands and he saw tears streaming down her face. But she was smiling. Oh my God. Thank you. I should go. I'm sorry for barging in. Do you have any idea what you just did? She stood, wiping her eyes, makeup smudging slightly. The contract would have transferred 60% of my company's voting shares to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. I'd have been CEO in name only. They'd have gutted everything my father built and sold it off piece by piece. Caleb's phone buzzed again. Sophie's babysitter. He'd forgotten to call. I really need to go, he said. My daughter. Please, just give me a minute. Ms. Bennett pulled out her own phone, typed something quickly. What floor do you normally clean? 63rd. Here. And 58 on Tuesdays and Thursdays. What time do you usually finish? Midnight. She nodded, still typing. I'm Aria Bennett. I inherited this company 6 months ago when my father had a stroke. I've been drowning ever since. Everyone tells me I'm too young, too inexperienced, too emotional. Maybe they're right. But I know when someone's trying to screw me over, even if I can't always prove it. I'm sorry about your father. Me too. She looked up from her phone. I want to hire you. Caleb blinked. I already work here for the janitorial company. I can't, not as a janitor, as an advisor, consultant, whatever title makes sense. I have 3 major international negotiations scheduled in the next 2 months, and apparently my entire advisory team has been lying to me. I need someone who can actually tell me what people are saying. Ms. Bennett, Aria, please. Aria, Caleb corrected, feeling strange using her first name. I appreciate the offer, but I'm not qualified for that kind of work. I don't have a degree. I've never worked in business. I've traveled a lot, picked up languages because I needed them. That's not the same as being a professional translator. You just saved my company. That makes you more qualified than anyone currently on my payroll. I have a daughter, Caleb said again, more firmly. She's 6. I can't take a job that might disappear in a week when you realize I have no idea what I'm doing. I need stability, health insurance, a paycheck I can count on. Arya studied him for a moment. What if I guaranteed your current salary plus 50%, maintained your health insurance, and offered a 6-month contract minimum? If it doesn't work out, I'll provide a severance package that covers 3 months. You'd have time to find another position. The numbers made Caleb's head spin. 50% more than he currently made would mean catching up on bills, fixing the leak in Sophie's bedroom ceiling, maybe even getting her the tutoring her teacher had suggested, but he couldn't afford. It would also mean stepping into a world where he didn't belong, where one mistake could destroy the fragile stability he'd fought so hard to build. I need to think about it, he said. Fair. Arya pulled a business card from her bag and handed it to him. Heavy cardstock, embossed lettering. My direct line. Call me tomorrow? Caleb took the card, feeling the weight of it in his palm. I will. He turned to leave, then paused. Those men, they'll try again. Different approach, same goal. I know. Arya's smile was grim. But now I know what to listen for. Caleb left the conference room, collected his cleaning cart, and headed for the service elevator. His hands shook slightly as he pressed the button. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation was fading, replaced by a creeping sense of vertigo. What the hell had he just done? His phone rang. Sophie's babysitter, done with texting. Hey Maria, I'm so sorry I got held up. Sophie's fine, Caleb. She finally fell asleep about 20 minutes ago, but she's worried about you. She said you sounded tired this morning. Guilt stabbed through his chest. I'll make it up to her tomorrow. We'll do something fun. You say that every week. I know. He stepped into the elevator. I'm trying. I know you are. See you tomorrow night? Yeah, same time. He hung up and leaned against the elevator wall, closing his eyes. The building directory played on a small screen above the buttons, advertising the luxury businesses that occupied the tower's upper floors. Bennett Global Enterprises dominated the top 10 floors. Caleb had cleaned those offices for months and never given any thought to who actually ran the company or what they did. Now he'd somehow inserted himself into corporate intrigue that could either change his life or destroy it. The elevator reached the ground floor. Caleb clocked out, changed into his street clothes in the employee locker room, and headed for the subway. Rain had started while he was inside, one of those sudden Manhattan downpours that sent tourists scrambling for overpriced umbrellas from street vendors. Caleb didn't bother. He was already soaked by the time he reached the station. The subway car smelled like wet fabric and industrial cleaner. Caleb found a seat near the door and pulled out Arya Bennett's business card, studying it under the harsh fluorescent lights. Arya Bennett, Chief Executive Officer, Bennett Global Enterprises Direct Line. Personal email. Embossed logo. He should throw it away. Go back to his quiet, exhausting, predictable life. Protect what little he'd managed to rebuild. But Emma's voice echoed in his memory. Something she'd said years ago, before Sophie, before the accident, back when they'd been young and stupidly fearless. You're going to spend your whole life playing it safe, Caleb, and you're going to die wondering what would have happened if you'd just taken one real chance. She'd been talking about his dream of studying linguistics. He'd been accepted to a graduate program with partial funding, but it meant 2 years of barely scraping by while Emma supported them both on her teacher's salary. He'd turned it down, took a stable job instead, made the responsible choice. Then she died, and none of his careful planning had mattered at all. The subway lurched to a stop. Caleb got off 3 blocks from his apartment building, an aging walk-up in a neighborhood the real estate listings called up and coming, and everyone else called cheap because it's sketchy. He climbed 4 flights of stairs, the elevator had been broken for 6 weeks, and unlocked his apartment door as quietly as possible. Maria sat on the couch, watching something on her phone with earbuds in. She pulled them out when Caleb entered. Hey, she's out cold, didn't even wake up when the neighbors started fighting. Thanks for staying late. No problem. Maria gathered her things. She was a nursing student, early 20s, from the apartment 2 floors down. She babysat Sophie 3 nights a week when Caleb worked, and he paid her what he could afford, which wasn't much. Oh, Sophie wanted me to remind you about the school thing Friday. Caleb's mind went blank. School thing? Spring concert. She's been practicing her song for weeks. Guilt crashed over him again. Right. Yes, I'll be there. She made me promise to make you promise. I promise. Friday. What time? 7. In the gym. Maria headed for the door, then paused. Caleb, you look exhausted. When's the last time you slept more than 5 hours? Can't remember. That's not sustainable. Yeah, well, he managed a weak smile. Sustainability is a luxury. After Maria left, Caleb checked on Sophie. She'd kicked off her blankets, she always did, and sprawled across her narrow bed like a starfish. Caleb pulled the covers back up gently, careful not to wake her. She looked so much like Emma it hurt. Same nose, same stubborn chin, same way of frowning slightly in her sleep, like even her dreams frustrated her. I'm trying, baby, he whispered. I'm really trying. He retreated to the apartment's main room, living room, dining room, and kitchen all in one cramped space. The leak in Sophie's ceiling had spread to the hallway. He'd put a bucket underneath it, but the constant drip, drip, drip made sleep difficult on his nights home. Caleb sat at their second-hand table and pulled out Aria Bennett's business card again. 50% raise, 6-month contract minimum, severance package. But also, a world he knew nothing about. Expectations he couldn't meet. The very real possibility of spectacular failure. He thought about Sophie's spring concert, about the tutoring she needed, about the birthday party she'd mentioned last week, some classmates' event at an arcade that charged $25 per kid. He'd told her they'd see, which Sophie had correctly interpreted as probably not. Caleb pulled out his phone and stared at Aria's number for a long time. Then he opened his notes app and started typing a list of questions he'd need answers to before making any decision. Responsibilities, hours, expectations. What happened if the 6 months ended and he had no other job lined up? He fell asleep at the table, phone still in his hand, while rain drummed against the windows and the bucket in the hallway slowly filled. His alarm went off at 6:30. Caleb jerked awake, neck stiff from sleeping hunched over the table. Sophie was already up, sitting cross-legged on the couch in her pajamas, watching cartoons at low volume so she wouldn't wake him. Morning, Dad. Morning, sweetheart. Caleb's back screamed as he stood. How long have you been up? Not long, there's no milk left. Of course there wasn't. He'd meant to get groceries yesterday. Toast okay? Toast is fine. They ate breakfast together in comfortable silence. Sophie, because she was absorbed in her show, Caleb because his brain felt like sludge. He'd worked last night and would work tonight. 12 hours between shifts barely counted as recovery time. Dad? Are you okay? He looked at his daughter, 6 years old, already learning to worry about the adult who was supposed to worry about her. I'm fine, baby, just tired. You're always tired. I know. I'm sorry. Miss Parker said you should talk to someone if you're stressed. Sophie kept her eyes on the TV, voice carefully casual. Like a doctor or something. Caleb's chest tightened. Did something happen at school? No, we just learned about feelings. Miss Parker said adults forget to talk about feelings sometimes. Miss Parker sounds very smart. She is. Sophie finally looked at him. Are you stressed? Yes. Constantly. Every moment of every day. Stressed about money, about being enough for her, about the future, about whether he was screwing up her childhood by working too much and sleeping too little. A little, he admitted, but I'm handling it. Okay, Sophie turned back to her show, apparently satisfied. Can we go to the park tomorrow if it's not raining? Absolutely. Promise? Promise. She smiled, Emma's smile, bright and trusting, and Caleb felt the weight of that trust settle over him like armor. After he got Sophie ready and walked her to school, Caleb headed home and tried to sleep. Failed. Lay in bed staring at the ceiling, his mind churning through last night's surreal encounter. At noon, he gave up and called Aria Bennett's direct line. She answered on the second ring. Aria Bennett. Ms. Bennett, it's Caleb Ward from last night. Caleb, thank you for calling. She sounded genuinely pleased. Have you thought about my offer? I have questions. Of course. Can you meet this afternoon? Say 2 o'clock? I have to pick up my daughter from school at 3. 1 o'clock then. Do you know Cafe Moreno on 53rd? I'll find it. See you there. Caleb hung up and stared at his phone for a solid minute. Then he got dressed in the only button-down shirt he owned that didn't have stains, checked his reflection in the bathroom mirror, and decided he looked exactly like what he was, a janitor pretending to be someone else. But he went anyway. Cafe Moreno occupied a corner building that probably used to be something industrial before Manhattan real estate turned every abandoned warehouse into overpriced lunch spots for people who wore ties to work. Caleb arrived 10 minutes early and stood outside, watching through the windows as business people gestured over salads that cost more than his grocery budget. He didn't belong here. The certainty sat heavy in his gut, but he pushed through the door anyway. Arya sat at a corner table, laptop open, phone pressed to her ear. She wore a gray suit that looked effortless in the way only expensive clothes managed, her dark hair loose around her shoulders instead of pulled back like last night. She looked younger, less guarded. She spotted Caleb and waved him over, holding up one finger in a just-a-minute gesture. "No, Michael, I don't care what the projection said," she was saying into the phone. "Get me the actual numbers from Q4, not the fantasy version marketing approved. I'll wait." She covered the phone's mouthpiece and gestured toward the empty chair across from her. "Sit. Coffee? Food?" "I'm fine." "You look like you need coffee." "I always look like that." She almost smiled, then her attention snapped back to the phone. "Michael, you still there?" "Great. Email me everything by 5. "Yes, everything, thanks." She hung up and closed her laptop. "Sorry, my CFO thinks if he buries me in optimistic reports, I won't notice the company's bleeding money." "Is it?" "Not yet, but it will be if I keep trusting people who smile while lying." She studied Caleb's face. "You didn't sleep." "I rarely do." "Kids?" "One kid, job, bills, the usual." A server appeared. Arya ordered an espresso and a sandwich Caleb couldn't pronounce. He asked for black coffee, then changed his mind and ordered the cheapest thing on the menu when his stomach reminded him he'd only eaten toast 12 hours ago. After the server left, Arya folded her hands on the table and looked at him directly. "So, questions." Caleb pulled out his phone and opened the notes he'd typed last night. "What exactly would this job involve, day to day?" "Honestly, I don't know yet. My father ran this company for 30 years. He had systems, relationships, strategies I'm still trying to understand. When he had his stroke, everything fell to me. I've been improvising ever since." "Multigassen." She paused. "What I do know is that I'm surrounded by people who either underestimate me because I'm young and female, or who are actively trying to take advantage of that fact. Last night proved I can't trust the advisors I inherited. So I need someone who can tell me the truth, even when it's uncomfortable. I'm not a businessman. I've never worked in an office. I don't know anything about mergers or acquisitions or... You speak 8 languages. Badly. You understood a Mandarin conversation well enough to know those men were planning to steal my company. That's not badly." "It's survival language," Caleb said. "Docks, factories, construction sites. I can order food, ask for work, understand when someone's threatening me. That's different from business negotiations." "Maybe." Arya leaned back as the server returned with their drinks. "But you understood something my $2,000 an hour translator missed, or deliberately ignored. Either way, you're already more valuable than he was." Caleb wrapped his hands around the coffee cup, letting the heat ground him. "What happened to your father, if you don't mind me asking?" "Massive stroke, 6 months ago. He was in his office on a call with investors in Singapore. His assistant found him unconscious." Arya's voice stayed steady, but her fingers tightened around her espresso cup. "He's alive, in a care facility in Connecticut, but he can't speak. Can't walk. The doctors say he understands everything, he just can't communicate. So I sit there every Sunday and tell him about the company, and I have no idea if I'm making decisions he'd approve of or destroying everything he built." "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't help me figure out who to trust." Their food arrived. Caleb's sandwich, turkey, basic, forgettable, looked pathetic next to Arya's elaborate salad situation. He ate anyway, suddenly ravenous. "What happened to your wife?" Arya asked. "If you don't mind me asking." Caleb nearly choked on his coffee. "How did you... Ostya. You mentioned your daughter multiple times last night, never mentioned her mother. And you're wearing a wedding ring on a chain under your shirt. I saw it when you reached for the door." Caleb's hand moved unconsciously toward his chest, where Emma's ring hung next to his own. He'd stopped wearing his on his finger 2 years ago when it kept getting caught on equipment, but he couldn't take it off completely. "Car accident," he said quietly. 4 years ago. Drunk driver ran a red light. She died at the scene. "I'm sorry." "Everyone's sorry. Sorry doesn't help." Arya's expression flickered, recognizing her own words thrown back. "Fair." They ate in silence for a moment. Outside, Manhattan rushed past the windows. Taxis, pedestrians, delivery trucks blocking intersections. The constant motion of a city that never stopped long enough to notice individual suffering. "Sophie," Caleb said suddenly. "My daughter. She was 2 when Emma died. She barely remembers her mother. Sometimes she asks questions, and I don't know how to answer them, like, why did Mommy leave? How do you explain to a 6-year-old that life is random and unfair, and the universe doesn't care about your plans?" "You can't." "No. You can't." Caleb set down his sandwich. "After Emma died, I couldn't stay in our apartment. Couldn't stay in our city. Couldn't stay in our life. So I left Sophie with Emma's parents, and I just ran. Took whatever jobs I could find. Mexico, Brazil, Thailand, Taiwan. Didn't matter where, as long as it was far from everything that reminded me she was gone." "How long were you gone?" 2 years. 2 years of Sophie growing up without me because I was too broken to be her father. The shame of it still burned. Emma's parents took good care of her. Better than I could have. But when I finally came back, Sophie barely knew me. She called me Caleb, not Dad. Just my name, like I was some stranger her grandparents mentioned occasionally. "What made you come back?" "Her grandparents died. Car accident. Different drunk driver, same random universe." Caleb's laugh came out bitter. "Suddenly I was Sophie's only option, so I came back and tried to figure out how to be a father when I'd barely figured out how to survive." Arya studied him for a long moment. "You think you're not qualified for this job because you don't have a degree or business experience, but you rebuilt a relationship with a daughter who didn't know you. You learned 8 languages by necessity. You walked into a room full of people who could destroy your livelihood and spoke up anyway because it was the right thing to do." She paused. "Those are the qualifications I actually need. Or I'm just reckless. Maybe, but I'll take honest recklessness over polished deception." Caleb wanted to argue. Wanted to list all the reasons this was a terrible idea. But part of him, the part that had been slowly suffocating under the weight of janitorial shifts and mounting bills and Sophie's carefully hidden disappointments, wanted desperately to say yes. 6 months guaranteed, Arya said. 50% above your current salary. I'll keep your health insurance active. If it doesn't work out, 3 months severance. And I'll be honest with you, I have no idea if this arrangement will succeed, but I know I can't keep doing this alone. What exactly would my title be? Special advisor to the CEO, vague enough to cover whatever we need it to cover. And your board, your executives, they'll accept you hiring a janitor with no credentials? Arya's smile turned sharp. My father owned 51% of the voting shares. I inherited them, which means I don't need the board's permission to hire anyone. They can complain all they want. They will complain. Let them. She pulled out her phone and opened a calendar. I have a negotiation in Chicago next Friday. Real estate development deal with a Norwegian investment firm. Can you speak Norwegian? No. German? Enough to get by. The lead investor is Norwegian, but the operational team is German. I need to know what they're actually saying when they think I'm not listening. She looked up from her phone. Are you in? Caleb thought about Sophie's spring concert, about the leak in her ceiling, about the tutoring she needed, and the birthday party he'd probably have to decline, and the 100 small ways poverty chipped away at childhood joy. He thought about Emma's voice. You're going to die wondering what would have happened if you'd just taken one real chance. I need to arrange childcare, he said. And I have a commitment Friday evening, my daughter's school concert. I can't miss it. We'll fly back Thursday night. You'll have all day Friday. And I want it in writing, the salary, the contract terms, the severance clause. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork today. You can review it before signing. Caleb took a breath, let it out slowly. Then yes, I'm in. Arya's smile was genuine this time. Thank you. Seriously, you have no idea. Her phone buzzed. She glanced at it and her expression hardened. Speak of the devil. Problem? Victor Kane, head of business development. He's been trying to push me out since my father got sick. Thinks I'm too young to run the company. She typed a reply with sharp, precise movements. He's going to lose his mind when he finds out I hired you. Looking forward to it, Caleb said, though his stomach churned. They finished lunch discussing logistics. Start date, Monday, 4 days from now. Office location, 63rd floor, naturally. Dress code, business casual, whatever that meant. Arya promised to have an assistant help him get appropriate clothes, which felt both helpful and humiliating. One more thing, Arya said as they stood to leave. Chicago next week. It's a 3-day trip. Can your daughter stay with someone? Her babysitter might be able to. I'll ask. If there's any issue, let me know. We can figure something out. They walked out together into the October afternoon. The temperature had dropped overnight, the sky that particular shade of gray that promised rain but never delivered. Caleb checked his phone. 2:30. He had 30 minutes before school pickup. I'll send you the contract by tonight, Arya said. Read it carefully. If anything bothers you, speak up. I will. And Caleb? She paused. Thank you. For last night, for this. For taking a chance on something that probably seems insane. Probably is insane, he corrected. Well, we'll figure it out together. She headed toward a sleek black car waiting at the curb, driver included apparently, while Caleb walked toward the subway. Different worlds, different lives, but somehow converging. He picked up Sophie from school and took her to the park like he'd promised, pushing her on the swings while she shrieked with delight. Later at home, he made spaghetti for dinner and helped her practice her concert song, something about rainbows and friendship that she belted out with impressive volume and questionable pitch. After she fell asleep, Caleb opened his laptop and found the contract from Arya's legal team. 20 pages of dense text that took him an hour to read carefully. Everything she'd promised was there. Salary, insurance, severance clause, 6-month minimum term. He signed it electronically and sent it back before he could change his mind. Then he called the janitorial company and gave his 2 weeks' notice. His supervisor sounded disappointed but not surprised. People left constantly. No one stayed a janitor forever if they had other options. The next 4 days passed in a blur of preparation and mounting anxiety. Maria agreed to watch Sophie during the Chicago trip in exchange for extra payment Caleb couldn't quite afford, but agreed to anyway. Arya's assistant, a terrifyingly efficient woman named Claire, took him shopping for appropriate work clothes and didn't even flinch when he had to check price tags before trying anything on. Friday afternoon, Caleb sat in Sophie's elementary school gym on a folding chair, surrounded by parents filming their children on phones. The concert was chaos. 25 6-year-olds attempting synchronized choreography while singing off-key. Sophie spotted him in the audience and waved frantically, nearly knocking over the kid next to her. She was perfect. After the concert, they got ice cream despite the cold weather. Sophie talked nonstop about her performance, how she'd remembered all the words, how her friend Madison had forgotten to bow at the end. "Dad, you're quiet," she said around a mouthful of chocolate chip. "Just listening." "Are you nervous about your new job?" Caleb had told her he was changing positions, leaving out most of the details. "A little. Miss Parker says it's okay to be nervous. It means you care. Miss Parker is very wise." "She is." Sophie kicked her legs against the bench. "Is the new job why we got ice cream even though it's cold?" "Maybe." "Cool. Can we do it more often?" "We'll see." That night, tucking Sophie into bed, Caleb felt the weight of what he'd committed to. On Monday, he'd walk into Bennett Global Enterprises not as a janitor, but as an advisor to the CEO. People would look at him differently, expect things he wasn't sure he could deliver. "Dad?" Sophie's voice was sleepy. "Yeah, baby?" "I'm proud of you." His throat tightened. "Why?" "Because you're trying something new. That's brave." "Where'd you learn that?" "Miss Parker." "Remind me to send Miss Parker a thank you card." Sophie giggled and rolled over, already half asleep. Caleb stood in her doorway for a long moment, watching her breathe. Then he retreated to the living room and pulled out his phone, opening a language learning app he'd downloaded. His German was rusty. If he was going to Chicago next week, he needed to brush up. He studied until 2 in the morning, long after exhaustion demanded sleep. Words and phrases cycling through his brain. Grammatical structures he'd learned by ear, now seen written out properly for the first time. Monday morning arrived faster than seemed physically possible. Caleb dropped Sophie at school, then took the subway to the building he'd cleaned for 7 months. But this time, instead of heading to the service entrance, he walked through the main lobby. The security guard who usually waved him through with barely a glance now checked his ID carefully. "You're on the list for 63, the guard said, surprise evident in his voice. "Bennett Global. New employee?" "Apparently. Good luck." He'd need it. The elevator ride felt different when you weren't hauling a cleaning cart. Caleb watched the floor numbers climb and tried to ignore the way his stomach twisted. The doors opened on 63 and he stepped into the reception area he'd mopped countless times. Claire, Arya's assistant, met him immediately. "Caleb, good morning. Let me show you to your office." "I have an office?" Ms. Bennett insisted. Claire walked briskly down hallways Caleb knew intimately from their after-hours emptiness. "It's small, but it has a window and a door that locks. You'd be surprised how many executives would kill for a door that locks." She stopped at a room Caleb had always assumed was storage. Inside, a desk, a chair, a computer, and a window overlooking 58th Street. Nothing fancy. But his. "Ms. Bennett is in meetings until 11, Claire said. "She'll brief you then. In the meantime, Ite will set up your computer access, and I need you to fill out approximately 900 forms for HR. Welcome to corporate America." She left him with a stack of paperwork that took an hour to complete. Name, address, emergency contact, tax information, direct deposit. The mundane details of employment. At 11 sharp, Arya appeared in his doorway. "How's the office?" "Surreal. Wait until you meet everyone else, then it'll be completely surreal." She gestured for him to follow. "We're doing introductions. Fair warning, Victor Kane will be in the room, and he already hates you." "We've never met." "Doesn't matter. I told him I hired you. That was enough." They walked to a conference room, not the one from that first night, but similar. Glass walls. Massive table. 8 people already seated, all watching Caleb enter with expressions ranging from curious to hostile. Arya took her place at the head of the table. Caleb stood awkwardly to her right, hyper-aware of how his off-the-rack suit looked next to the custom tailoring surrounding him. "Everyone, this is Caleb Ward," Arya said. "He's joining us as a special advisor. Caleb, this is the executive team." She went around the table, names blurred together. CFO, COO, head of legal, head of marketing. Then she reached a man in his mid-40s with silver-touched hair and a smile that didn't reach his eyes. Victor Kane, head of business development. Victor extended his hand. Caleb shook it, noting the excessive pressure, the kind of handshake meant to establish dominance. "Mr. Ward," Victor said smoothly, "I understand you previously worked in facilities management." The phrasing made it sound almost respectable. "I was a janitor." "Yes." "Fascinating career trajectory, from cleaning offices to advising a Fortune 500 company. You must have remarkable qualifications we're not aware of." "I speak 8 languages." "How useful." "I speak 3 myself." Harvard language programs are quite thorough. The room's temperature seemed to drop several degrees. Caleb stopped a corporate fraud that would have cost this company controlling ownership, Arya said, voice cold. "That's his qualification. Any other questions?" Silence. "Good. Let's move on." The meeting continued, quarterly projections, upcoming negotiations, personnel issues, and Caleb tried to follow along. Corporate jargon flew thick, references to deals and strategies he knew nothing about. He felt like an anthropologist observing a culture where he didn't speak the language, despite technically understanding every word. Victor's eyes kept drifting toward him, calculating, dismissive. The look made Caleb's skin crawl. After the meeting, people filed out quickly. Victor lingered. "A word, Arya?" he said, pointedly not inviting Caleb to stay. "Caleb stays," Arya replied. "He's my advisor. That means he sits in on strategic conversations." Victor's jaw tightened. This is a mistake. You're letting personal gratitude cloud your professional judgment. This man has no business being in this building, let alone influencing company decisions. Noted. Anything else? I've built my reputation on protecting this company's interests. Your father trusted me for 15 years. If you continue down this path, I'll have to consider whether my continued employment serves those interests. Is that a threat? It's a statement of fact. Then let me give you one, Arya said. My father trusted you for 15 years. But he's not here anymore. I am. And I'm making different choices. You can adapt or you can leave. Your decision. Victor's smile turned poisonous. We'll see how long your different choices last. He nodded curtly and left. Caleb let out a breath. I'm making you enemies. You're helping me identify people who were already enemies. There's a difference. Arya pulled out her phone. Claire's sending you briefing documents for Chicago. Read everything tonight. We fly out tomorrow at 6 a.m. Tomorrow? I moved the meeting up. The Norwegians are getting impatient. She paused. Problem? I need to arrange Sophie's care earlier than planned. Can your babysitter adjust? I'll find out. He called Maria from his new office. His office, the surreal reality of that still hadn't settled, and convinced her to take Sophie a day early. It cost him extra money he didn't have, but he agreed without hesitation. That evening, after picking up Sophie and feeding her dinner and helping with homework, Caleb sat at their apartment table reading briefing documents until his eyes burned. Norwegian Real Estate Development Company, German operational team, complex financing structure involving 3 countries and 4 different regulatory frameworks. He understood maybe 60% of what he read. Sophie wandered over around 9, already in her pajamas. You're studying? Sort of. For your new job? Yeah. Are you scared? The question surprised him with its directness. A little. That's okay. Brave people get scared too. She climbed into his lap, something she was getting too big for, but he'd never tell her that. They just do it anyway. More wisdom from Miss Parker? Nope, that's from me. Caleb wrapped his arms around his daughter and held on tight. When did you get so smart? I've always been smart. You just noticed. He laughed despite the exhaustion. Go brush your teeth. I'll be there in a minute to read you a story. After Sophie fell asleep, Caleb packed for Chicago. 3 days. Business clothes that still felt like costumes. The anxiety that had been building all day crystallized into something close to panic. What the hell was he doing? He had no experience, no training, no business sitting in negotiations involving millions of dollars. One mistake could destroy not just this opportunity, but potentially Arya's company. His phone buzzed. Text from Arya. Stop panicking. I can feel it from here. How do you know I'm panicking? Because I'm panicking too. See you at 6. Somehow that helped. Caleb set his alarm for 4:30 and tried to sleep. Failed. Lay awake listening to Sophie's quiet breathing from the next room, the drip from the hallway bucket, the sirens that punctuated Manhattan nights with mechanical regularity. He thought about Emma, about the linguistics program he'd turned down, about all the careful choices that had led to safe, predictable unhappiness. This was different, reckless, terrifying. But maybe Miss Parker and Sophie were right. Maybe brave people did things scared. His alarm went off. Caleb dragged himself out of bed and got ready in the dark. Maria arrived at 5:15, sleepy but reliable. Sophie barely woke when Caleb kissed her goodbye. Love you, baby, he whispered. Love you too, she mumbled, already drifting back to sleep. Caleb grabbed his bag and headed into the pre-dawn darkness. The car Arya sent picked him up at 5:30. They drove to a private terminal at LaGuardia. Apparently commercial flights were for people who didn't own companies. Arya met him on the tarmac, carrying coffee in a travel mug and looking far too alert for the ungodly hour. Ready? She asked. No. Perfect. Me neither. They boarded a small jet, 10 seats, leather, everything, the kind of luxury Caleb had only seen in movies. Arya immediately pulled out her laptop and started working. Caleb tried to read more briefing documents but couldn't concentrate. Somewhere over Pennsylvania, Arya closed her laptop and looked at him. You're overthinking. Probably. Here's what's going to happen. We'll sit in a room with people who assume I'm too young to understand business and you're too unqualified to matter. They'll speak German when they think we're not listening. You'll tell me what they're actually saying. We'll adjust our strategy accordingly. She paused. It's not complicated. It's extremely complicated. Fine, it's complicated, but we're doing it anyway. They landed in Chicago just after 8 local time. Another car waiting. Another smooth transition from plane to vehicle to hotel. The kind of seamless travel that only happened when you had assistants coordinating every detail. The hotel was downtown, glass and steel rising above the river. Their rooms were on the 42nd floor. Caleb dropped his bag and stood at the window, looking out at the city spreading in every direction. His phone rang. Sophie, using Maria's phone. "Hi, Dad." "Hey, sweetheart, you doing okay? Maria made pancakes with chocolate chips. Can we have those at home?" "Sure." "And she said we can watch movies tonight. 2 movies. Is that okay?" "If Maria says it's okay, it's okay." "Awesome." Background noise. Maria saying something. "I gotta go. We're going to the park. Love you." "Love you too." She hung up before he could say anything else. Caleb stood holding his phone, suddenly feeling the distance between Chicago and New York like a physical ache. A knock on his door. Arya changed into a dark blue suit that probably cost more than his monthly rent. "Meeting's at 10, she said. "Conference room on the 3rd floor. You good?" "I'm good." Liar. Come on. Let's get breakfast and go over strategy one more time. They ate in the hotel restaurant, Arya attacking a plate of eggs while reviewing notes, Caleb forcing down toast his stomach didn't want. At 9:45, they headed downstairs. The conference room was predictably impressive. Long table, leather chairs, wall of windows overlooking the river. 5 men already seated. 3 older, clearly the decision-makers, 2 younger, probably assistants or junior analysts. Arya made introductions. Caleb shook hands, smiled, said very little, let them assume he was just some assistant Arya brought along. The meeting started in English. Polite discussion of terms, timelines, project scope. Everyone cordial, professional. Then one of the older men, Henrik, the lead investor, said something in German to his colleague, low, casual, the kind of comment meant to be private. Caleb's German was rusty but functional. His brain caught up after a 2-second delay. Henrik had just said, "She's younger than I expected. This will be easier than we thought." His colleague responded, "The numbers she proposed are laughable. We'll counter at 60% and she'll accept rather than lose the deal." Caleb kept his expression neutral. Under the table, he pulled out his phone and typed quickly, then slid it toward Arya. She glanced down, read his message. Her expression didn't change, but something shifted in her posture. The meeting continued. Henrik presented their counteroffer. Exactly 60% of what Arya had proposed, just like his colleague had predicted. Arya smiled. "That's an interesting number. Unfortunately, it doesn't work for our structure. I'm prepared to negotiate, but not from that baseline." Henrik's smile faltered slightly. "Ms. Bennett, perhaps you don't understand the current market. I understand perfectly, which is why I know you can do better than 60%. She leaned forward. "Shall we discuss realistic terms, or would you prefer to waste both our time?" The room temperature shifted. Henrik exchanged glances with his colleagues, confused, calculating. For the next 2 hours, they negotiated seriously. Arya held her ground, made strategic concessions, extracted compromises. Caleb continued feeding her information whenever the Germans spoke among themselves, updates on their actual bottom line, concerns they wouldn't voice in English, strategies they planned to deploy. By noon, they'd reached an agreement both sides could live with. Significantly better than Henrik's opening offer. Papers were signed, hands were shaken. As they filed out, Henrik pulled Arya aside. "You negotiate more aggressively than your father did." "Thank you." "I'm not sure it was a compliment." "I'm not sure I care." Back in the elevator, alone, Arya finally let herself smile. "We did it." "You did it. I just translated. You gave me the information I needed to know where they'd actually compromise. That's not just anything." The elevator doors opened on their floor. "Dinner tonight? Celebration?" "Sure." "Great. I know a place. 8 o'clock. Wear something nice." Caleb went back to his room and called Sophie. Told her about Chicago, about the tall buildings, about the river. She told him about the park, about the movies she'd watched, about how Maria let her stay up past bedtime. "When are you coming home?" Sophie asked. 2 more days. That's forever." "I know, but it'll go fast." After they hung up, Caleb lay on the hotel bed and stared at the ceiling. They'd succeeded. The negotiation had worked. Arya had been right to trust him. But this was just one meeting, one deal. The easy part. The hard part would be proving he belonged in this world when everyone, including himself, knew he didn't. The restaurant Arya chose occupied the top floor of a building overlooking Lake Michigan. Floor-to-ceiling windows, dim lighting, the kind of place where the host greeted you by name and the menu didn't list prices. Caleb felt immediately out of place despite the sport coat he'd bought specifically for occasions like this. Arya was already seated when he arrived, wearing a black dress that managed to be both elegant and understated. She waved him over. "You look uncomfortable," she said as he sat down. "I am uncomfortable." "The restaurant or the situation?" "Both," she smiled. "At least you're honest." "Wine?" "I don't really drink." "Me neither, actually, but everyone expects it at these places." She closed the wine list without looking at it. "Water's fine." They ordered, Caleb picking something at random, Arya clearly familiar with the menu, and settled into the kind of silence that felt less awkward than it should have. "You did well today," Arya said finally. "Henrik's used to intimidating people. You didn't even blink." "I spent 2 years working jobs where looking scared got you fired or worse. You learned to keep your face neutral." "Where exactly did you work? You've mentioned factories, docks, construction, but never specifics." Caleb took a drink of water, buying time. He didn't talk about those years. Not to anyone. Not even to Sophie, though someday he'd have to explain why Daddy disappeared for so long. "São Paulo first," he said quietly, loading trucks at a distribution warehouse. 12-hour shifts, cash under the table, sleeping in a room with 8 other guys. Then Jakarta. Construction crew building luxury condos for people who'd never speak to workers like us. Thailand after that. Restaurant kitchen, Taiwan. Shipping containers. He paused. "Everywhere I went, I learned just enough of the language to survive, to understand when supervisors were lying about pay, when coworkers were planning to rob you, when to keep your head down, and when to push back." Why those places specifically? Because they were far away. Because nobody knew me. Because I could disappear into the work and not think about... He stopped. "It doesn't matter now." "It does if it's still affecting you. Everything affects everything. Doesn't mean it's worth discussing." The food arrived, rescuing him from further interrogation. They ate in silence for a while. The restaurant hummed with quiet conversation, the clink of expensive silverware on expensive plates. "My father had a stroke during a video call," Arya said suddenly. "I was in the room. We were arguing about something stupid, marketing strategy, I think. He got frustrated with me, like he always did when I questioned his decisions. Then his face went slack, just stopped working. He tried to say something and couldn't, tried to stand and fell. I called 911, but I knew. Even before the paramedics arrived, I knew nothing would be the same." Caleb set down his fork. "I'm sorry." "He was impossible, demanding, never thought I was ready to lead anything. Groomed my brother for the position until my brother decided he'd rather be a photographer in Portland than a corporate executive." She laughed without humor. "So I became the default option. The disappointment daughter who got the company because nobody else wanted it." "You're not a disappointment. You don't know that. You saved your company from a hostile takeover. You negotiated a complex deal with experienced investors and won. That's not disappointment. That's competence. Or luck. Maybe you're just good at your job and I'm riding your coattails." "That's not what happened today." Arya looked at him across the table. "How do you do that?" "Do what?" "Say things like you actually mean them, like you're not just being polite or strategic." "Because I do mean them. Life's too short for bullshit. See? That. Nobody talks like that in my world. Everything is calculated. Every conversation has an agenda." "Maybe you're in the wrong world." "Maybe I am." She pushed food around her plate. "Can I ask you something personal?" "You can ask, can't promise I'll answer." "Why did you come back? After 2 years away from Sophie, what changed?" Caleb's chest tightened. "Emma's parents died. Sophie had nobody else." "That's obligation. I'm asking what made you actually come back and try. Because a lot of people would have just sent money, found someone else to raise her. You didn't." He was quiet for a long moment. Outside the windows, Chicago glittered against the darkness. Millions of lives playing out in those lit windows. millions of private struggles nobody else would ever know about. I got a call from the social worker handling her case, Caleb said finally. She told me Sophie was being placed in foster care temporarily while they searched for permanent arrangements. And I thought, fine, good. Sophie deserves stability, deserves better than a father who can't even look at her without falling apart. He stopped, swallowed hard. Then the social worker mentioned that Sophie had been asking about me, asking when I was coming back, and I realized she'd been waiting for 2 years, while I ran away and pretended I was protecting her by staying gone. You were grieving. So was she. She lost her mother and her father the same day. Difference was, her father was still alive and chose to leave anyway. The shame of it burned fresh despite the years. So I came back, got Sophie out of the system, got a job that would support us, and I've been trying to be enough ever since. You're more than enough. You barely know me. I know you walked into a room of powerful people who could have destroyed your life and spoke up anyway. I know you're raising a daughter alone while working yourself to exhaustion. I know you learned 8 languages because you had to survive. Arya leaned forward. Those aren't small things, Caleb. He wanted to argue, wanted to list all the ways he'd failed, all the moments he'd fallen short. But her expression stopped him. She wasn't offering empty comfort. She was stating what she believed to be facts. Your turn, Caleb said. Personal question. Fair. Why did you hire me? Really, not the official reason about languages and negotiations. The actual reason. Arya considered this. Because you reminded me of my father. Not his personality. He was nothing like you, but the way you moved, the way you spoke, like you'd seen things that changed you and you weren't trying to hide it. She paused. Everyone around me is so polished, so perfect, everything rehearsed and strategic. You walked into that conference room looking terrified and did it anyway. That's rare, in my experience. I was terrified. I know, that's why it mattered. They finished dinner and Arya insisted on walking back to the hotel despite the cold. The Chicago wind cut through Caleb's jacket, but Arya seemed unbothered, hands tucked into her coat pockets. Tomorrow's meeting is with the development team, she said. Less high stakes, more technical. They'll probably speak English the whole time, but listen anyway. People get comfortable and sloppy when they think nobody's paying attention. Got it. They reached the hotel lobby. Arya hesitated. Thank you for tonight, for talking. I don't really have people I can just talk to anymore. Everyone wants something, or they're judging me, or they're waiting for me to fail. I'm not waiting for you to fail. I know. She smiled. That's why I can talk to you. Good night, Caleb. Good night. He went upstairs and called Sophie. She was already half asleep, Maria's voice in the background telling her to say goodnight quickly. Miss you, Dad, Sophie mumbled. Miss you too, baby. See you soon. After hanging up, Caleb stood at his window looking out at the city. 2 successful meetings, Arya's trust growing, his confidence fractionally less shaky than before. But he couldn't shake the feeling that something was building, some consequence he hadn't anticipated. The next day proved him right. The morning meeting went smoothly. Technical discussion, minimal tension. Caleb caught a few side comments in German, but nothing significant. They finished by noon and headed back to New York on the same private jet. Arya worked during the flight. Caleb tried to sleep, failed, settled for reading news on his phone. An email notification popped up from an address he didn't recognize. Subject line. You should know what people are saying. He almost deleted it, probably spam. But curiosity won. The email contained a link to an internal company message board. Someone had started a thread titled, New Advisor Raises Questions. Caleb clicked. The thread was brutal. Anonymous posts from Bennett Global employees speculating about his hiring, his qualifications, his relationship with Arya. Some posts merely questioned the decision. Others got vicious. She hired a janitor to advise her on multi-million-dollar deals. Either she's lost her mind, or there's something else going on. Plot twist. They're sleeping together and she's too embarrassed to admit she makes terrible personal decisions. My cousin works on 63. Says this guy literally mopped floors 2 weeks ago. Now he's traveling with the CEO? Come on. Bennett's father is probably spinning in his grave. Oh wait, he's not dead. just trapped in a body that can't stop his daughter from destroying his legacy. Caleb's stomach turned. He looked up at Arya, absorbed in her laptop, unaware of the poison spreading through her company's internal networks. He should tell her. But what would that accomplish except make her feel worse? The plane landed. They took separate cars from the airport, Arya back to the office, Caleb to pick up Sophie from Maria's apartment. His daughter launched herself at him the moment he walked in, wrapping her arms around his waist. "You were gone forever." 3 days. That's forever in kid time. Maria smiled from the doorway. She was great. No problems. Caleb paid her, thanked her profusely, and took Sophie home. She talked nonstop about the movies they'd watched, the park they'd visited, the new game Maria had taught her. Normal 6-year-old chaos that felt grounding after 3 days in corporate unreality. That evening, after Sophie went to bed, Caleb pulled out his laptop and read through more of the message board thread. It had grown. Hundreds of posts now. Most critical. Some defending him, or more accurately, defending Arya's right to hire whoever she wanted. One post stopped him cold. "I did some digging. Caleb Ward. Disappeared for 2 years after his wife died. Left his kid with grandparents. Bounced around foreign countries doing who knows what. No college degree. No professional experience. And now he's suddenly qualified to advise a Fortune 500 CEO? Either he's got something on her, or she's monumentally stupid. Neither option is good. They'd investigated him, found his history, twisted it into evidence of incompetence or worse. His phone rang. Arya. "Have you seen the message boards?" she asked without preamble. "Yeah. I'm shutting down the thread. Claire's already working on it." "That won't stop people from talking." "No, but it'll stop them from doing it on company infrastructure." She sighed. "I'm sorry. I should have anticipated this." "It's fine. It's not fine. They're attacking you because they can't attack me directly. I can handle it." "You shouldn't have to." Caleb looked at the laptop screen, at the comments dissecting his life, his choices, his worth. "Arya, if this becomes a problem, if it hurts the company or your credibility, I'll step aside. No hard feelings." "Absolutely not. I'm serious. I'm not worth—" "Stop. Don't finish that sentence." Her voice was sharp. "You're worth exactly what I'm paying you, which is less than you deserve considering what you've already done. People are talking because people always talk. It means nothing. It means I'm a liability. You're an asset they're threatened by. There's a difference." After they hung up, Caleb sat in the dark apartment listening to the familiar sounds. Dripping bucket. Street noise. Sophie's quiet breathing from the next room. He'd known this couldn't last. Known that eventually reality would intrude on whatever fragile arrangement he and Arya had built. People like him didn't get to advise CEOs, didn't get to travel on private jets and negotiate million-dollar deals. People like him cleaned floors and stayed invisible. But then he thought about Sophie asking when he'd be home, about Arya's smile when the Chicago deal closed, about the first time in 4 years he'd felt like something other than just a body going through motions. Maybe he didn't belong in Arya's world, but maybe that didn't matter as much as he thought. The next morning, walking into Bennett Global, Caleb felt the shift immediately. People stared, whispered. A group of executives stopped talking when he passed them in the hallway. Claire met him at his office door. "Ms. Bennett wants to see you. Conference room B." He found Arya already there, along with Victor Kane and 2 people Caleb vaguely recognized from the executive team. "Caleb, sit," Arya said. Her tone was professional, cold almost. He sat. Victor smiled, not friendly. "Mr. Ward, thank you for joining us. We're addressing some concerns raised by employees regarding your position." "What concerns?" "Your qualifications, your background, the optics of your hiring." Victor pulled out a tablet. "I've received 47 formal complaints from employees questioning the legitimacy of your role. They want transparency about your credentials, your salary, your relationship with Ms. Bennett." "My relationship with Ms. Bennett is professional." "Is it?" Victor's smile widened. "Because from an outside perspective, it looks questionable at best. A young female CEO hires a man with no relevant experience, no degree, and a history of unstable employment. She takes him on business trips, gives him an office, pays him, what, 50% above his previous salary for work he's not qualified to perform? I'm qualified. Are you? Based on what credentials exactly? Caleb looked at Arya. She sat very still, expression unreadable. I speak 8 languages, Caleb said. I've worked in international environments where understanding cultural context and hidden meanings was the difference between success and failure. Ms. Bennett hired me because I provide value the company wasn't getting elsewhere. The company had professional translators, professional advisors, all with relevant degrees and experience. Professional translators who missed or deliberately ignored a hostile takeover attempt hidden in plain language. Victor's expression hardened. We have no evidence that situation was handled improperly. Except for the contract Ms. Bennett was about to sign that would have transferred control of the company to foreign investors. Your interpretation of that contract. My correct interpretation. Gentlemen, Arya's voice cut through the tension. Victor, I appreciate your concerns, but my hiring decisions aren't subject to employee approval. Caleb stays. Even if it damages company morale? Even if it raises questions about your judgment? My judgment is sound. The employee complaints are based on gossip and assumption. I won't fire someone because people are uncomfortable with unconventional hiring. Victor stood. This conversation isn't over, Arya. The board will want explanations. Then I'll explain to the board, same as I'm explaining to you. Caleb is qualified. He's effective. He stays. After Victor left, along with the other executives, Arya slumped back in her chair. That went better than expected. Did it? Victor expected me to fold. I didn't. That counts as a win. She looked at Caleb. How are you holding up? I'm fine. Liar. I'm functional. That's close enough. Arya stood and walked to the window. My father used to say the problem with running a company is that you're always making someone unhappy. Shareholders want growth. Employees want stability. Customers want innovation. You can't give everyone what they want, so you pick your priorities and accept that people will hate you for it. Do you hate him? Your father? Sometimes. She turned back. He never believed in me. Never thought I could handle this. And now I'm proving him right by making decisions he'd never approve of. You're not proving him right. You're proving that his way wasn't the only way. Maybe. She checked her phone. Miami tomorrow. Partnership negotiation with a logistics company. Portuguese and Spanish, likely. Can you handle both? Portuguese is rough, but yeah. Good. Flight leaves at 7 a.m. I need to arrange Sophie's care again. Take her with you. Caleb blinked. What? Bring Sophie. We're staying at a hotel with a pool and kids club. She can swim and play while we work. You can see her in the evenings. Arya shrugged. I'm tired of you missing time with your daughter because of this job, so we'll make it work differently. Arya, you can't. I'm the CEO. I can do whatever I want. Bring your daughter to Miami. That evening, Caleb told Sophie about the trip. Her eyes went wide. Miami? Like with beaches? Hotel pool, at least. Can I bring my floaties? Absolutely. She bounced on the couch, excitement radiating. This is the best thing ever. Can Maria come? Maria has classes, but there's a kids club at the hotel. You'll make friends. Will you be there? Some of the time. I'll be working during the day, but we'll have breakfast and dinner together. Sophie threw her arms around him. You're the best dad. The words hit harder than they should have. I try. The flight to Miami felt different with Sophie along. She pressed her face to the plane window, marveling at clouds and distant cities. Arya spent 20 minutes playing tic-tac-toe with her, cheerfully losing every game. She's letting me win, Sophie whispered to Caleb. I know. That's nice of her. It is. The hotel was oceanfront, enormous, the kind of place Caleb never imagined staying. Sophie's eyes went huge when she saw their connected rooms. We get 2 rooms? You get your own room, with a door between so I can check on you. This is amazing. Arya appeared in the doorway between rooms. Sophie, want to see the pool before dinner? Yes. They spent an hour at the pool, while Caleb reviewed briefing documents for tomorrow's negotiation. Sophie shrieked and splashed, Arya laughing as she helped her practice floating. Watching them together created an ache in Caleb's chest he couldn't quite name. Later, after Sophie fell asleep in her room, Caleb found Arya on her balcony overlooking the ocean. Thank you, he said, for this, for including her. She's part of your life, which means she's part of this arrangement. Arya didn't look away from the water. My father never let personal life interfere with business. Work came first, always. And I spent my whole childhood competing with a company for his attention. She paused. I don't want to build that kind of life. You're building something different. Trying to. She finally looked at him. The Miami team is tougher than Chicago, more aggressive. The lead negotiator has a reputation for finding weaknesses and exploiting them ruthlessly. What kind of weaknesses? Emotional ones. He investigates people before meetings, finds personal pressure points. If he's done his homework, he knows about Sophie, about Emma, about your history. Caleb's jaw tightened. Let him know. Won't change anything. You say that now. I mean it. The next morning, they left Sophie at the kids' club. She was nervous but excited and headed to the meeting. The logistics company occupied a sleek office building in downtown Miami. The reception area screamed money and power. The lead negotiator, Carlos Mendez, met them personally. Late 40s, expensive suit, smile that was all calculation and no warmth. Ms. Bennett, a pleasure. He shook Arya's hand, then turned to Caleb. And you must be the famous Caleb Ward, the janitor who became an advisor overnight. What an inspiring story. Mr. Mendez, please call me Carlos. We're all friends here. His smile widened. I understand you have a daughter. Sophie, correct? 6 years old. Must be difficult balancing work and single parenthood. Caleb's expression didn't change. I manage. I'm sure you do. Though I imagine it helps having a CEO who's willing to bring children on business trips. Not everyone would be so accommodating. The implication hung in the air. Arya's voice went cold. Shall we discuss the actual partnership, Carlos? Or would you prefer to continue making inappropriate personal observations? Carlos laughed. Direct. I like that. Please, let's talk business. The negotiation was brutal. Carlos pushed on every term, questioned every projection, demanded concessions on points that should have been non-negotiable, and he kept circling back to Caleb, making small comments designed to undermine. Perhaps Mr. Ward has insights, given his extensive background in custodial services. I'm curious what someone without business training thinks of our profit-sharing proposal. Does Mr. Ward even understand the regulatory framework we're discussing? Caleb stayed quiet, listening. The operational team spoke Spanish when discussing strategy among themselves, rapid colloquial Spanish that assumed the Americans wouldn't follow. They were wrong. Caleb caught every word. Caught Carlos telling his team to push harder on insurance liability, that Arya would cave rather than lose the deal. Caught the finance director mentioning their actual bottom line was 12% lower than their stated position. He passed notes to Arya throughout the meeting. She adjusted her strategy accordingly, pushing back exactly where Carlos expected easy wins. By afternoon, Carlos's smile had turned brittle. You negotiate more aggressively than I anticipated, Ms. Bennett. You expected someone easier to manipulate. I expected someone reasonable. I'm being perfectly reasonable. You're being predatory. There's a difference. They broke for the day without reaching agreement. Carlos insisted on continuing tomorrow. Arya agreed, though Caleb could see the exhaustion creeping in. Back at the hotel, they picked up Sophie from the kids' club. She was sun-tired and happy, chattering about the friends she'd made. Dad, can we get ice cream? After dinner. Please, I was so good today. She was excellent, the kids' club supervisor confirmed. Very polite. They got ice cream. Sat on the beach watching the sunset while Sophie built sandcastles, and Arya answered emails on her phone. He's trying to break you, Caleb said quietly. I know. Tomorrow he'll push harder. Let him. Arya, I'm not backing down. This deal matters, not just financially. If I cave to Carlos, word spreads. Every future negotiation gets harder. She looked at him. Can you handle another day of his bullshit? Can you? I asked first. Yeah, I can handle it. Sophie ran over, covered in sand. Can we swim before bed? Quick swim, Caleb agreed. They spent an hour in the pool. Sophie teaching Arya a complicated game that seemed to involve diving for coins and making up rules as they went. Caleb floated on his back, watching stars appear in the darkening sky. This moment felt stolen, borrowed from a life that wasn't his, but he held on to it anyway. Later, after Sophie crashed hard from exhaustion, Caleb stood on the balcony between their rooms. Arya appeared beside him. She's great, Arya said. Your daughter. She is. Emma would be proud of you. The comment surprised him. You didn't know Emma? No, but I know you, and I know you're raising someone kind and brave and joyful despite everything you've been through. That's not luck. That's good parenting. Caleb's throat tightened. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together. Most parents feel that way. Difference is, you actually are holding it together. She bumped his shoulder lightly. Get some sleep. Tomorrow's going to be worse than today. She was right. Carlos started the morning negotiation by placing a folder on the table in front of Arya. Before we continue, I thought you should see this. Arya opened the folder. Her expression went carefully blank. Caleb leaned over. Photos. Him and Arya at dinner in Chicago, walking back to the hotel. Him carrying Sophie through the Miami hotel lobby. At the pool yesterday. Just so we're clear, Carlos said smoothly, I have no judgments about your personal life, but the optics of mixing business with other entanglements, well, it raises questions. Arya closed the folder. Are you blackmailing me? I'm sharing information that might be relevant to our partnership discussions. You're implying a relationship that doesn't exist to gain negotiating leverage. I'm observing what anyone can see. Carlos leaned back. Mr. Ward joined your company 2 weeks ago. No experience, no credentials, and yet he accompanies you everywhere. Shares meals, now shares family trips. At minimum, it demonstrates poor judgment. At worst, you're making slanderous accusations you can't prove, Arya interrupted. Her voice was ice. And you're doing it because your negotiating position is weak and you're desperate. My position is strong. Your position is 12% below where you're claiming, and you know it. I know it because my advisor, she gestured to Caleb, understands Spanish better than you assumed. We've known your actual bottom line since yesterday afternoon. So drop the intimidation tactics and negotiate honestly, or this meeting is over. Carlos's face went red. He looked at Caleb, then at his team, who'd gone very quiet. You speak Spanish, Carlos said flatly. Among other languages, Caleb replied. And you didn't think to mention this? You didn't ask. You just assumed. The temperature in the room plummeted. Carlos's team exchanged nervous glances. The finance director who'd mentioned their actual numbers looked ill. Gentlemen, Arya said pleasantly, would you like to restart this negotiation with accurate numbers, or should we end discussions entirely? It took another 4 hours, but they reached an agreement. Not perfect, but fair. Carlos signed the papers with barely concealed fury. As they left the building, Arya's phone rang. She listened, her expression darkening. When? A pause. How bad? Another pause. I'll be there tonight. She hung up and looked at Caleb. We need to get back to New York. Now. What happened? Victor called an emergency board meeting. He's making a formal motion to remove me as CEO. They collected Sophie from the kids' club in a rush that left her confused and slightly hurt. She'd been in the middle of a craft project, glue still drying on construction paper. But I didn't finish my... I'm sorry, baby, Caleb said, already packing her things. We have to go, emergency. What kind of emergency? Work stuff. I'll explain on the plane. Except he couldn't explain on the plane because he didn't fully understand what was happening himself. Arya spent the entire flight on her phone and laptop, making calls, reviewing documents, her face getting progressively tighter. Sophie sat pressed against Caleb's side, quiet in that way kids got when they sensed adult panic but didn't understand the source. Did I do something wrong? She whispered. What? No, baby, no. Caleb wrapped his arm around her. This has nothing to do with you. Arya's having problems at work. Is she going to lose her job? I don't know. Are you? The question hit harder than it should have. Maybe. Sophie was quiet for a moment. Then, if you lose your job, can we still get ice cream sometimes? Despite everything, Caleb smiled. Yeah, we can still get ice cream. They landed at LaGuardia just after 8. Arya had a car waiting. She looked at Caleb, something raw and frightened in her expression that she was trying hard to hide. The board meeting is at 9 tomorrow morning. Victor's presenting a case for my removal based on gross mismanagement and conflicts of interest. What conflicts? You. He's arguing that my relationship with you constitutes a conflict that's damaging company credibility and employee morale. So fire me. I'm not firing you. Arya, if keeping me costs you the company, I said no. Her voice was sharp, then softer. I'm not giving them what they want just because they're loud about wanting it. That's not how this works. Caleb wanted to argue, but Sophie was right there, listening to every word. What do you need from me? Tomorrow, 9 a.m., conference room A. I need you there. The board won't want me in the room. I don't care what the board wants. She left in her car. Caleb and Sophie took a taxi back to their apartment. Maria wasn't available this late, so Caleb brought Sophie to bed, still in her travel clothes, too exhausted to fight about pajamas and teeth brushing. Dad? Sophie's voice was small in the darkness. Yeah? Is Arya going to be okay? I hope so. I like her. Me too. She's nice, and she's funny, and she didn't get mad when I splashed her at the pool. Caleb's chest ached. She is all those things. If she loses her job, will we still see her? The question gutted him because he didn't have an answer. If Arya lost the company, what was left between them? A failed professional relationship? Shared memories of a few weeks when something impossible briefly seemed possible? I don't know, baby. Sophie rolled over, facing him in the dim light from the hallway. You should help her, like you did before. I'm trying. Try harder. Out of the mouths of children. After Sophie finally fell asleep, Caleb sat at their kitchen table and opened his laptop. He pulled up every document he had access to regarding Bennett Global's recent negotiations. The Chicago deal. Miami. The original merger Arya had nearly signed. He cross-referenced contract terms, looked for patterns, tried to understand what Victor's actual game was. Because this wasn't really about Caleb. Victor had been positioning against Arya since before Caleb existed in this world. Caleb was just convenient ammunition. Around 2 a.m., Caleb found something. A detail in the original merger documents that hadn't made sense at the time. A shell corporation listed as a silent partner. He ran the corporation through public records databases, tracing ownership through 3 layers of holding companies. The trail ended at a name he recognized, Victor Kane. Victor had been on both sides of the deal that would have stolen Arya's company. He'd stood in that conference room, pretending to advise her, while secretly partnering with the people trying to take control. Caleb's hands shook as he downloaded every document, every record, every piece of evidence he could find. If this was real, if Victor had actually been planning to betray Arya from the inside, it changed everything. He worked until dawn, cross-referencing financial records, building a timeline. When Sophie woke up at 6:30, Caleb had 17 pages of documentation and a case that would either save Arya or get them both destroyed. You look terrible, Sophie observed, eating cereal at the table. Didn't sleep much. Because of Arya's emergency? Yeah. Did you fix it? I might have. Or I might have made it worse. Won't know until later. He got Sophie ready for school, walked her there despite his exhaustion, then went home and showered. Put on his most professional suit. Printed out every document he'd compiled. At 8:30, he left for Bennett Global. The building felt different this morning. Hostile. He rode the elevator to 63 with 2 executives who very deliberately didn't look at him. Whispers followed him down the hallway. Claire intercepted him before he reached the conference room. Caleb, Ms. Bennett wanted me to tell you the board asked that you not attend the meeting. What did she say? She told them you were attending anyway. Claire's professional mask slipped slightly. For what it's worth, I think you're good for her. She's been more focused, more confident since you started. Just wanted you to know that before you walk into that room. Thanks, Claire. Conference room A was already full. 12 board members around the table. Victor at one end, looking supremely confident. Arya at the other end, looking calm in a way that probably cost her everything she had. Caleb walked in, and the room fell silent. Mr. Ward, one of the board members, elderly, severe, said coldly, "This is a closed meeting." Ms. Bennett invited me, Caleb replied. Ms. Bennett doesn't have the authority to override board restrictions during a removal proceeding. Actually, I do, Arya said. My father's shares give me majority control, which means I can invite whoever I want to any meeting, Caleb stays. Victor smiled. By all means, let Mr. Ward witness your final mistakes as CEO. Caleb sat in the chair beside Arya. She didn't look at him, but he felt the tension radiating off her. The meeting began with Victor presenting his case. Caleb had expected professional language, careful phrasing. What he got was character assassination dressed up as corporate concern. Arya Bennett has demonstrated a pattern of poor judgment that threatens this company's future, Victor began. Most notably, her decision to hire an individual with zero relevant experience, zero credentials, and a personally questionable background to advise on multi-million-dollar negotiations. He pulled up Caleb's employment history on the screen, made it look as damning as possible. The gaps, the international bouncing, the janitor position. This man was cleaning toilets 3 weeks ago. Now he travels with our CEO, influences major business decisions, and has been given access to sensitive company information. The optics alone are catastrophic. The optics, Arya said quietly, or the results? Excuse me? You're focusing on optics, on how it looks. What about how it worked? We closed the Chicago deal at terms 15% better than our initial projections. Miami came in at favorable terms despite aggressive opposition. Both negotiations benefited directly from Caleb's language skills and strategic insights. Coincidence, Victor said, or luck. Either way, it doesn't justify the risk of maintaining someone so clearly unqualified in a sensitive advisory role. Another board member, younger, hungry-looking, jumped in. There's also the matter of the personal relationship. Mr. Ward's daughter accompanied you on the Miami trip. That suggests an inappropriate level of involvement. My advisor has childcare needs, Arya said. I accommodated them. That's not inappropriate. That's practical. It's unprofessional. According to whose standards? My father's? The man who spent so much time at work that his children barely knew him? Arya's voice hardened. I'm building something different, a company where talented people aren't punished for having lives outside these walls. If that's unprofessional, fine. Call it unprofessional. Victor seized the opening. You hear that? She admits she's operating outside professional standards. She admits she's prioritizing personal feelings over company interests. I'm prioritizing people, Arya corrected. There's a difference. A difference that's costing us credibility, employee morale, and investor confidence. Victor pulled up more documents. I have formal complaints from 47 employees about Mr. Ward's hiring. I have concerns from 3 major investors about the company's leadership direction. You have evidence of people being uncomfortable with change, Arya interrupted. That's not the same as evidence of actual harm. The harm is reputational. It's measurable in our stock price, which has increased 8% since I took over. Victor's jaw tightened. Short-term fluctuations don't indicate long-term stability. Neither do your manufactured concerns. They went back and forth for 30 minutes, Victor building his case brick by brick, Arya defending each point methodically. The board members mostly stayed quiet, watching the battle play out. Caleb sat still, folder on his lap, waiting for the right moment. It came when Victor played his final card. I move that this board remove Arya Bennett as CEO, effective immediately, and install interim leadership until a permanent replacement can be identified. Victor looked around the table. Who seconds? The hungry-looking board member raised his hand. Seconded. Discussion? The elderly board member asked. Caleb stood up. Every eye turned toward him. Arya looked surprised. Victor looked annoyed. Mr. Ward, you're not a board member. You don't have speaking privileges in this. I have evidence, Caleb said quietly, that Victor Kane has been systematically working to undermine this company for his own financial gain, and I think the board should see it before they vote. The room erupted. This is absurd. He can't just... Out of order. Arya held up her hand. Let him speak. Arya, this is ridiculous, Victor said. He's clearly desperate to save his position, and he's making wild accusations. Then it won't hurt to hear them. Arya's eyes were locked on Caleb. Go ahead. Caleb opened his folder and pulled out the first document. 3 weeks ago, Arya was presented with a merger agreement that would have transferred control of Bennett Global to foreign investors. The deal was structured through a shell corporation called Meridian Holdings. He slid the document across the table. Meridian Holdings is owned by a network of subsidiary companies. If you trace the ownership structure back far enough, you find that Victor Kane owns 20% of the entity that would have gained control of this company. Victor went very pale. I have investments in various ventures. That doesn't mean, it means you were on both sides of a deal you were supposed to be advising against. Caleb pulled out more documents. The translator who failed to catch the hidden terms? Recommended by you. The law firm that structured the contract? Your former employer. The investors pushing the deal? You introduced them to Arya. This is circumstantial nonsense. Is it? Caleb spread out financial records. Because I also have evidence that you've been receiving payments from Meridian Holdings for the past 8 months. Consulting fees, officially. Bribes, actually. You were being paid to deliver this company to them. And when that failed, you shifted to Plan B. Remove Arya and install someone more cooperative. The board members leaned forward, examining documents. Victor stood frozen, his confidence cracking. These records, one board member said slowly, show payments totaling nearly $2 million. Consulting fees, Victor repeated. Perfectly legal. While you were employed as an executive here? Another board member, sharp-eyed and skeptical. That's a conflict of interest at minimum, potentially fraud. I want my lawyer, Victor said. I bet you do. Arya stood up. She looked at Victor with an expression Caleb couldn't quite read. Anger, yes, but also something like pity. How long were you planning this? Since my father got sick? Earlier? Victor didn't answer. You stood in meetings, Arya continued, voice quiet and cutting, and you advised me. You told me who to trust, which deals to take, and the whole time you were positioning to take everything. She paused. Did you even feel guilty? Your father promised me this company, Victor said suddenly, the words bursting out. 20 years I worked beside him. 20 years of building Bennett Global into what it is. And when it came time to choose a successor, he picked you. His disappointment daughter who barely showed up to board meetings, his backup plan. Victor's face twisted. You don't deserve this company. You never did. So yes, I made other arrangements. And I'd do it again. The silence that followed was absolute. Well, the elderly board member said finally, I believe that's what we call a confession. Victor, you're terminated effective immediately. Security will escort you out, and I suspect we'll be seeing you in court. Victor looked around the table, desperate. You can't. I have contracts, violated by your own admitted actions. Leave now or we'll have you removed. 2 security guards appeared, Claire must have called them, and escorted Victor out. He went quietly, the fight draining out of him as reality set in. After he left, the room stayed silent for a long moment. Finally, Arya sat down. I move we table the removal vote indefinitely. Seconded, said 3 board members simultaneously. All in favor? The vote was unanimous. Just like that, it was over. The meeting adjourned. Board members filed out, several stopping to shake Arya's hand, apologized for doubting her, promised their support. A few even nodded at Caleb as they passed. Then it was just the 2 of them in the enormous conference room. How did you find all that? Arya asked. Didn't sleep, drank too much coffee. Got lucky. Caleb sank into a chair, exhaustion crashing over him. I wasn't sure it would be enough. It was more than enough. You just saved my company. You saved your company. I just found the receipts. Arya laughed, slightly hysterical. We make a good team. Yeah, we do. She covered her face with her hands. Her shoulders shook. Caleb realized she was crying, the silent, overwhelming kind of tears that came after holding yourself together past the breaking point. He stood up, uncertain. Arya. She waved him off. I'm fine. It's been a long few weeks. You don't have to be fine right now. Yes, I do. I'm the CEO. I have to. Her voice broke. I'm so tired, Caleb. I'm so tired of fighting everyone, of proving myself, of wondering if my father was right, and I'm not capable of this. Your father was wrong. You don't know that. I know you just survived a coordinated attack by someone who had 20 years of institutional knowledge and relationships. I know you made deals that protect your company's future. I know you hired me despite everyone telling you it was crazy, and it worked. Caleb paused. Your father built something impressive. but he also built something that required him to sacrifice everything else. You're building something different, something that includes room for actual human beings. That's not weaker. It's harder. Arya lowered her hands. Her makeup was smudged, her composure shattered. She looked young and scared and real. "Thank you," she said. "For last night, for this morning, for everything. You hired me. I'm just doing my job." "This wasn't your job. This was—" She stopped. "I don't know what this was, but thank you." They sat in silence for a while. Outside the windows, Manhattan continued its relentless motion. Somewhere in that city, Sophie was at school learning math or reading or whatever 6-year-olds did at 10 in the morning. Somewhere, Victor Kane was calling lawyers. Somewhere, life continued forward. "What happens now?" Caleb asked. "Now I actually have to run this company without someone actively trying to destroy it." Arya smiled weakly. "Should be easier, right?" "Probably not. Probably not," she agreed. Claire knocked on the open door. "Ms. Bennett, the press is calling. They've heard about Victor's termination. What do you want me to tell them?" "Tell them we discovered a conflict of interest and handled it appropriately. No further comment." "Will do." Claire paused. "Congratulations, by the way. Both of you." After she left, Arya stood and straightened her suit, wiped away the mascara smudges, became the CEO again, piece by piece. "Take the rest of the day," she told Caleb. "Spend it with Sophie. You've earned it." "What about you?" "I have about 900 fires to put out, but I'll manage." She headed for the door, then stopped. "Caleb, I know this started as just a job, but somewhere along the way it became, I don't know, something else. Friendship, maybe. Partnership. Whatever it is, I'm grateful for it." "Me too." After she left, Caleb sat alone in the conference room for several minutes. His hands were shaking slightly. Adrenaline crash, probably. The documents were still scattered across the table, evidence of betrayal, of greed, of the knife that had been aimed at Arya's back for months. He'd stopped it. Somehow. A janitor with no business being in this world had walked into a boardroom and changed the outcome. Emma would have been proud. The thought came unbidden, painful and comforting at once. Caleb gathered the documents, put them in order, and left them for Arya's legal team. Then he walked out of Bennett Global and took the subway to Sophie's school. He arrived just as lunch was ending, signed her out early, telling the office he had a family thing. Sophie bounced out of her classroom, surprised and delighted. "Dad, what are you doing here? Playing hooky. Want to get ice cream and go to the park? In the middle of the day? Why not?" Sophie's grin was incandescent. Best day ever. They got ice cream despite the October chill, sat on a park bench watching pigeons fight over discarded bagels while Sophie chattered about her morning, her friends, the art project she'd finally finished. "Did Arya keep her job?" Sophie asked between bites of chocolate chip. "Yeah, she did." "Because you helped?" "Partly." "I told you to try harder." Sophie looked smug. "I was right." "You were absolutely right." "Am I always right?" "Don't push it." She giggled and leaned against his side. "Can we see Arya soon? I want to show her my finished craft." "We'll see." "That means probably not." "That means I don't know yet. Things are complicated." Adults always say things are complicated, but they're not really. You just make them complicated. Caleb looked at his daughter, 6 years old, sitting in a park, eating ice cream, reducing the entire mess of his life to simple truth. "When did you get so smart?" "I told you already. I've always been smart." They stayed in the park until Sophie got cold. Then they went home, and she did homework at the kitchen table while Caleb made an actual dinner for once instead of reheating something frozen. Around 7, his phone rang. "Arya." "How's your day off?" she asked. "Good. Quiet. How's the fire management?" "Exhausting but manageable. Legal is building a case against Victor. Prosecutors might get involved. It's a whole thing." She paused. "I'm calling because I have a question. A big one." "Okay." "I want to create a new position, head of international strategy, not just advising, actually building a department that handles all our global negotiations and partnerships, hiring translators, cultural consultants, risk analysts, the whole structure." Another pause. "I want you to lead it." Caleb's brain stalled. "Arya, I'm not qualified to—" Stop. Don't finish that sentence. You proved today that you're more qualified than anyone I could hire. You understand people. You see patterns. You caught a betrayal that everyone else missed. That's not luck. That's skill. Her voice softened. I'm asking you to help me build something better. A company that values actual human understanding over polished credentials. Are you in? Caleb looked at Sophie, bent over her math homework, tongue poking out in concentration. Thought about the apartment with the leaking ceiling and the broken elevator. Thought about Emma and the graduate program he'd never pursued and all the careful choices that had led to safe, small unhappiness. Thought about Victor's face when the evidence landed on the table. About Arya's tears after the board meeting. About Sophie asking if they could still get ice cream if he lost his job. I'm in, he said. But I have conditions. Name them. Reasonable hours. I'm not missing Sophie's school events or sacrificing time with her for deals that can wait. Transparent communication. If you need something, tell me directly. Don't hint or expect me to guess. And if I screw up, tell me. Don't let me fail quietly to protect my feelings. Done. Anything else? Yeah, hire people smarter than me. I'm serious. I know my limits. I need a team that fills the gaps in my knowledge. I'll hire whoever you recommend. Arya's voice held a smile. Welcome to leadership, Caleb. After they hung up, Sophie looked up from her homework. Was that Arya? Yeah? Is she okay? She's good. Really good. Are you okay? Caleb thought about it. Actually thought about it instead of giving the automatic response. Yeah, I think I am. Good. Sophie returned to her math. Can you help me with this problem? I don't understand what it's asking. Caleb sat beside his daughter and looked at the worksheet. Simple arithmetic dressed up in word problems. He walked her through the logic, watched her face light up when she understood. This was enough. This moment. This small apartment with its leaking ceiling and broken elevator. This daughter who asked hard questions and gave simple answers. This job that terrified him and excited him in equal measure. Emma's voice echoed in his memory. You're going to die wondering what would have happened if you'd just taken one real chance. Well, now he'd know. Sophie finished her homework and demanded they read 3 books before bed instead of the usual one. Caleb agreed, too tired to negotiate. They read about dragons and princesses and a bear who was afraid of the dark. That bear is silly, Sophie observed. The dark isn't scary. What if something's in the dark? Then you turn on a light and look. Being scared doesn't help. More wisdom from Miss Parker? Nope, that's from me too. After Sophie fell asleep, Caleb stood in her doorway, watching her breathe. 4 years ago, she'd been a stranger calling him by his first name. Now she was the center of his entire world. The reason he got up each morning. The measure of every decision. His phone buzzed. Text from Arya. Thank you again for today. You saved more than my company. You reminded me why I wanted to save it in the first place. Caleb typed back. You would have figured it out without me. Maybe. But I'm glad I didn't have to. He set his phone down and walked to the window. Manhattan glittered below, endless lights representing endless lives. Somewhere in that sprawl, Arya was probably still working, putting out fires, planning the future. Somewhere, Victor was facing consequences. Somewhere, the world kept turning. And here, in a small apartment with a leaking ceiling, Caleb Ward finally stopped running from the life he'd been too afraid to build. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new crises. But for tonight, he had everything that mattered. His daughter sleeping safely in the next room, a job that felt like purpose instead of just survival, and the quiet understanding that sometimes the bravest thing you could do was stay. 6 months later, Caleb stood in front of 15 people in a conference room that didn't feel quite real yet. His conference room, his team. The words still felt borrowed. Okay, so the Singapore contract, he said, pulling up the document on screen. Maria, you caught the discrepancy in Section 7. Walk everyone through what you found. Maria Chen, 26, fluent in Mandarin and Cantonese, formerly working retail because no one would hire her without a degree, stood up nervously. The translation they provided says Mutual Oversight Committee, but the Chinese characters actually mean Advisory Committee with final decision authority. It's subtle, but it shifts power completely. Good catch, Caleb said. That's exactly the kind of thing that gets missed when companies rely on generic translation services. They assume language is just swapping words. It's not. It's understanding intention. He looked around the table. Former factory workers, immigration specialists, people who'd learned languages in streets and homes instead of classrooms. People who understood that communication was about survival before it was about business. His team, built from scratch over the past months. Arya had given him budget and autonomy and told him to find people who saw the world differently. So he had. David, how's the Johannesburg prep coming? David Okafor, Nigerian, spoke 6 languages, had driven a taxi in Brooklyn for 8 years, nodded. Ready. I've reviewed all contracts, cross-referenced local regulations. The development team is trying to rush the timeline, but I found 3 permit issues that'll cause delays if we don't address them now. Send me your notes. I'll brief Arya this afternoon. After the meeting, Caleb returned to his office. Not the small room from those early weeks, but an actual space with a real desk and filing cabinets and a view of the East River. Photos of Sophie covered one wall. She'd insisted on decorating it herself, choosing frames at a craft store and arranging everything with intense 6-year-old precision. His phone rang. Sophie's school. His stomach dropped. This is Caleb Ward. Mr. Ward, this is Principal Morrison. Sophie's fine, but there was an incident on the playground. Another student pushed her. She pushed back. We need you to come in for a conversation. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He grabbed his jacket and stopped by Arya's office. She was on a call but waved him in. He waited while she finished negotiating something with someone in rapid French that he mostly followed. Sophie's school called, he said when she hung up. I need to go. Is she okay? She's fine. Playground fight. Go. Do you need anything? Just wanted you to know I'll miss the 3 o'clock with legal. I'll handle it. Give Sophie a hug from me. The easy partnership of it still caught him off guard sometimes. The way Arya trusted him to leave when his daughter needed him. The way she'd restructured meeting schedules around school pickups without ever making it feel like an inconvenience. He took a taxi to Sophie's school, one of the small luxuries his new salary afforded, and found her sitting in the principal's office looking mutinous. Dad, it wasn't my fault. I'm sure it wasn't, baby, but let's hear what happened first. The story came out in pieces. Another student, Marcus, had been teasing Sophie about her lunch. Something about how poor people ate weird food. Sophie had told him to stop. He'd pushed her. She'd pushed back harder. Marcus has been suspended for the rest of the day, Principal Morrison said. We're implementing a zero-tolerance policy on bullying, but Sophie also needs to understand that physical retaliation isn't— She's 6, Caleb interrupted, and she was defending herself. Mr. Ward, I understand, but we have to teach conflict resolution. You have to teach kids that bullying has consequences. Caleb kept his voice level. Marcus targeted my daughter for being different. She stood up for herself. I'm not going to punish her for that. Principal Morrison looked uncomfortable. We expect all students to use their words, not their hands. And when words don't work, then they come to a teacher. And how long does that take? How many times does she have to ask politely before someone intervenes? Caleb leaned forward. I grew up poor. I know what it's like when other kids decide you're lesser because of what you bring for lunch or how your clothes fit. Teaching Sophie to be passive doesn't protect her. It teaches her that being a target is her fault. Sophie watched this exchange with wide eyes. Principal Morrison sighed. I understand your perspective, but our policy can include room for self-defense. Sophie's not suspended. If that's a problem, I'll take her out of school today and we'll discuss it with the school board. There was a long pause. Then, that won't be necessary. Sophie can return to class, but we'll be monitoring the situation. Fair enough. Outside the office, Sophie grabbed Caleb's hand. Am I in trouble? No. But I pushed Marcus. You stood up for yourself. That's different. Principal Morrison said I should have told a teacher. Principal Morrison has to say that. Doesn't mean it's always right. Caleb knelt down to her level. Sometimes people will try to make you feel small because they think you're different or don't belong. You can walk away. You can tell an adult. But if someone puts their hands on you, you're allowed to defend yourself. Always. Don't let anyone convince you otherwise. Sophie hugged him hard. Thanks, Dad. Anytime, baby. He took her out for lunch at a diner near the school. Grilled cheese and fries, her favorite. She talked nonstop about Marcus and the playground and how her friend Emma had told Marcus he was mean and how the teacher had made everyone sit in timeout. "Dad, are we poor?" Sophie asked suddenly. The question stopped him. "Why do you ask?" "Marcus said we are. Because I bring lunch from home instead of buying it." "We're not poor, we're careful with money. There's a difference." "What's the difference?" Caleb thought about their apartment, still small but no longer leaking, about the raises and bonuses that had accumulated over 6 months, about the savings account that finally had more than 3 digits. Being poor means you don't have enough. Being careful means you have enough, but you remember what it felt like when you didn't. He paused. "We're doing okay now, Sophie. Better than okay. But that doesn't mean we waste things." "Okay." She returned to her fries. "Can I still bring lunch from home? I like your sandwiches better than the cafeteria." "You can bring lunch from home." After dropping Sophie back at school, Caleb returned to Bennett Global. The afternoon passed in meetings and contract reviews and emails. Around 6, Arya appeared in his doorway. "How'd it go with Sophie?" "Fine. She defended herself. Principal tried to punish her for it. I objected." "Good." Arya came in and sat down. "I'm heading to Connecticut tomorrow to see my father. Want to come?" The invitation surprised him. "You've never asked before." "I know, but I thought, I don't know. Maybe it's time." They drove out Sunday morning. Sophie came too, entertained in the back seat with a tablet and headphones. The care facility was expensive and quiet, all soft colors and gentle voices. Arya's father occupied a sunny room overlooking gardens. He sat in a wheelchair by the window, body present but vacant. Arya had warned Caleb about this, but seeing it was different. The man who'd built Bennett Global was gone, leaving only a shell. "Hi, Dad." Arya kissed his forehead. "I brought friends. This is Caleb Ward. He's head of international strategy now, and this is Sophie." Sophie hung back shyly. The presence of someone so clearly broken frightened her. "It's okay," Caleb said quietly. "Mr. Bennett can't respond, but he can hear us." "Are you sure?" "The doctors think so." Arya settled into a chair and began talking, told her father about the company, the new deals, the restructuring she'd implemented. Caleb listened, struck by how much had changed in 6 months. New partnerships, new markets, new approaches that prioritized people over pure profit. "Victor went to trial last month," Arya said. "Fraud, embezzlement, corporate espionage. He got 7 years. I thought you'd want to know." Her father didn't react. Never did, according to Arya, but she kept talking anyway. After an hour, they left. Sophie was quiet in the car. "That was sad," she said finally. "Yeah," Arya agreed. "It is." "Does he know you're there?" "I hope so." "Do you miss him, like the way he was before?" Arya was quiet for a long moment. "I miss who I thought he was. Not sure I miss who he actually was. Does that make sense?" "No. Me neither. But it's true anyway." That evening, back in the city, Arya joined them for dinner at the apartment. She'd been coming over more frequently over the past months. Casual dinners, Sunday morning pancakes, movie nights where Sophie fell asleep between them on the couch. Nothing had been discussed, no labels attached, just the slow accumulation of shared time that felt easy and right. Sophie monopolized Arya during dinner, showing off her latest drawings and explaining complex 6-year-old politics involving who sat with whom at lunch. Arya listened with genuine attention, asking questions, laughing at the right moments. Later, after Sophie went to bed, Caleb and Arya sat on the fire escape with coffee. The November air was cold but not unbearable. "I've been thinking," Arya said, "about the company, about what we're building." "Yeah?" "My father created something successful, profitable, powerful, but it required him to sacrifice everything else. Family, relationships, any life outside work." She stared out at the city. "I don't want that. I don't want to wake up 20 years from now and realize I built the same thing, just with better intentions." "So don't." "It's not that simple." "It kind of is. You decide what matters. You structure the company around those values. You accept that some people will think you're doing it wrong." Caleb paused. "You've already started, letting me leave for Sophie's school stuff, hiring people without traditional credentials, prioritizing work-life balance. That's not accidental. That's intentional culture building. And if it makes us less competitive, has it? You've closed more deals in 6 months than the previous year. Revenue's up. Employee satisfaction surveys are the highest they've been in a decade. He looked at her. You're not sacrificing success by caring about people. You're building something sustainable. Arya smiled. When did you get so wise? I've always been wise. You just noticed. She laughed, a real laugh, unguarded. That's Sophie's line. She's a smart kid. They sat in comfortable silence for a while. Below them, the neighborhood hummed with evening activity. Music from an open window, voices speaking Spanish, Chinese, English, the multilingual chaos of New York. Caleb, can I ask you something personal? Sure. Do you ever think about dating, moving on from Emma? The question didn't surprise him as much as it should have. Sometimes, but dating requires time and energy I don't have, and it feels disloyal somehow, like I'm replacing her. You wouldn't be replacing her, you'd be living. I am living. You're surviving really well. That's different. Caleb considered this. What about you? Do you date? Haven't had time. Or interest, really. Everyone I meet wants something from me, access, connections, money. It's exhausting. She paused. Present company excluded. I want things from you. Salary, health insurance, reasonable work hours. That's employment, different category. Is it? Arya looked at him. Really looked at him, in the way she sometimes did that made Caleb feel simultaneously seen and terrified. What are we doing, Caleb? Right now? Having coffee on a fire escape. You know what I mean. He did. The question had been hovering for months. The dinners, the easy partnership, the way Sophie had started calling Arya by her first name without the careful distance she used with other adults. I don't know, Caleb said honestly. I know I like having you around. I know Sophie adores you. I know working together feels natural in a way nothing else has in a long time. Beyond that? He shrugged. I'm making it up as I go. That's terrifying. Yeah, but also kind of freeing. Also, yeah. Arya smiled. Okay, making it up as we go. I can work with that. The weeks blurred into holidays. Thanksgiving at Arya's penthouse, huge space, beautiful view, but she'd admitted she had no idea how to cook a turkey. So Caleb and Sophie had come over early, and they'd figured it out together, the three of them in a kitchen that cost more than most apartments, arguing about oven temperature and whether stuffing went inside or beside the bird. The meal was imperfect, turkey slightly dry, potatoes lumpy. But they ate it around Arya's dining table while Sophie narrated everything she was thankful for in exhaustive detail, and it felt like family. December brought Sophie's winter concert. Caleb sat in the same gym on the same folding chair, but this time Arya sat beside him. Sophie spotted them both and waved so enthusiastically she nearly hit the kid next to her. She's excited you're here, Caleb said. I'm excited to be here. The concert was the same beautiful chaos as the last one. Sophie remembered most of her words this time, only forgetting during the final verse. After, they took her out for hot chocolate despite the late hour. Arya, did you see me? Sophie asked for the fourth time. I saw you. You were amazing. I forgot the last part. Nobody noticed. I noticed. Okay, you noticed, but you recovered really well. Sophie considered this. I did recover well. Miss Parker said that's what matters. Not being perfect, but knowing what to do when you mess up. Miss Parker is wise beyond her years, Caleb observed. She's like 40, Sophie said. That's not beyond years. That's just regular years. Arya laughed into her hot chocolate. Christmas brought conversations about logistics, where to spend it, what traditions mattered. Sophie wanted a tree. They'd never had one before because the apartment was too small, and Caleb was never home enough to water it. Get a tree, Arya said. I'll help decorate. So they did. A small tree, nothing fancy, decorated with lights Sophie chose and ornaments they made from construction paper and glue. It leaned slightly to the left and shed needles constantly, but Sophie loved it with fierce devotion. Christmas morning, Caleb woke to Sophie jumping on his bed at 6 a.m. Dad, there are presents. Extra presents. Did you know there are extra presents? He stumbled into the living room to find the space under their crooked tree overflowing. Sophie's gifts, modest, carefully budgeted, had multiplied overnight. New presents and expensive wrapping paper with cards that said, "From Aria," books, art supplies, a telescope Sophie had mentioned wanting once in passing, clothes that actually fit. Things Caleb had wanted to give her but couldn't quite afford. His chest tightened with gratitude and something like shame. He picked up his phone. "You didn't have to do this." Arya's response came immediately. "I wanted to. Merry Christmas. It's too much. It's exactly enough. Now stop texting me and watch your daughter open presents." Sophie's joy was incandescent. She tore through wrapping paper, exclaiming over each gift, already planning what she'd do with everything. When she reached the telescope, she stopped. "This is the one from the museum store, the expensive one." "Yeah, Arya got me the expensive one." "She did." Sophie was quiet for a moment, holding the box carefully. "Dad, is Arya, like, your girlfriend?" The question landed like a stone in still water. "Would that bother you?" "No, I like Arya. She's nice and she listens when I talk and she doesn't treat me like a baby." Sophie paused. "Is she your girlfriend, though?" "I don't know. We haven't really discussed it." "You should discuss it." "Oh, should I?" "Yeah, because if she's going to be around all the time anyway, it would be good to know what we're supposed to call her." Out of the mouths of children. Later that day, Arya came over for dinner. They'd planned it weeks ago, Christmas together, casual, just the three of them. She brought wine for the adults and fancy lemonade for Sophie and a homemade dessert she'd clearly spent hours on. They ate too much food and watched Sophie play with her new telescope and argued about which Christmas movie to watch. Sophie fell asleep on the couch halfway through, curled up between Caleb and Arya. "We should move her to bed," Caleb whispered. 5 more minutes. They sat in the dim light of the TV and the tree, Sophie's quiet breathing between them, and Caleb thought about all the Christmases he'd survived rather than lived. The first one after Emma died. The ones overseas when he'd worked through the holiday to avoid feeling anything. The ones after he'd returned when he and Sophie had been strangers sharing space. This was different. This felt whole. "Sophie asked if you were my girlfriend," he said quietly. Arya smiled. "What did you tell her?" "That I didn't know. That we hadn't discussed it." Very diplomatic. "She said we should discuss it." Smart kid. "So," Caleb looked at Arya across his sleeping daughter. "Should we discuss it?" "I don't know. What would we say?" "That I care about you. That having you in our lives makes everything better. That I'm terrified of screwing this up." All reasonable points. Arya was quiet for a moment. "I care about you too. About both of you. And I'm also terrified. My track record with relationships is terrible. I scare people off with my work schedule, or they want things I can't give, or they're interested in Bennett money, not me. I have my own job now. Your money doesn't impress me. I know. That's why this might actually work." "Might?" "I'm being realistic. We work together. You have a daughter. I run a company. The complications are significant." "True." Caleb thought about this. "But the alternative is walking away from something good because we're afraid of the complications. And I've spent enough of my life walking away from things." Arya looked at him, expression soft. "So we try?" "Actually try, not just make it up as we go." "We try, while also making it up as we go, because let's be honest, neither of us knows what we're doing." "Fair." They moved Sophie to her bed without waking her. When Caleb returned, Arya was putting on her coat. "Stay," he said. "It's late." "I know, stay anyway." She hesitated, then took off her coat. They talked until 2 in the morning, sitting on the worn couch in the apartment Caleb had once been embarrassed to let anyone see. Talked about Emma and Arya's father, and the different ways grief shaped people. About Sophie and the company and what they wanted their futures to look like. "I don't need perfect," Arya said. "I've spent my whole life around people performing perfection. It's exhausting. I just need real." "I can do real." "I know. That's why this scares me." Morning arrived too fast. Arya left early, kissing Caleb goodbye in the doorway like it was the most natural thing in the world. Sophie woke up an hour later and immediately asked if Arya had stayed over. "She did." "Did you discuss it?" "We did." And we're trying, being together, as a couple. Sophie nodded seriously. Good, I approve. I'm so relieved. You should be. I have very high standards. The new year brought new challenges. A major negotiation in Tokyo that required Caleb to be gone for 5 days. A restructuring at Bennett Global that eliminated positions and created enemies. A difficult conversation with Sophie's teacher about her reading level and whether she needed additional support. But it also brought moments of unexpected grace. Sophie reading her first full book alone and running to tell Caleb with tears of pride in her eyes. Arya successfully navigating a hostile board meeting without Caleb's help, then calling him afterward just to hear his voice. The three of them finding a rhythm that worked, some nights at Caleb's apartment, some at Arya's penthouse, all of them feeling equally like home. In March, Sophie asked the question Caleb had been dreading. Dad, do you think Mom would like Arya? They were making breakfast, pancakes, Sophie's weekend ritual. Caleb nearly dropped the spatula. Why do you ask? Because I like her. But Mom was your wife, and I don't remember her much, and I wondered if she'd be okay with Arya being around. Caleb turned off the stove and sat down at the table. Sophie joined him, sensing the seriousness. Your mother would absolutely like Arya, he said carefully. Mom wanted people to be happy. She wanted me to be happy. She wouldn't want us to be alone forever just because she's gone. Do you miss her? Every day? But you like Arya. I do. Both things are true. Missing your mom doesn't mean I can't care about someone else. Hearts are big enough for multiple people. Sophie considered this. My heart has room for Mom, even though I don't remember her much. And room for you and Arya and my friends and my teacher and everybody. Exactly. Okay, I just wanted to make sure. She paused. Can we finish making pancakes now? Yeah, baby, we can finish making pancakes. In April, Caleb's team closed a deal in South Korea that the company had been pursuing for 2 years. The celebration was company-wide, and for the first time, Caleb stood at the front of a room accepting congratulations from executives who 6 months ago had wanted him fired. You've built something remarkable, one of them said. The international division is the company's strongest asset now. Caleb accepted the compliment, but later, alone in his office, he thought about what actually made him proud. Not the deal. Not the recognition. But the team he'd built. People who'd been invisible in their previous lives, now running complex negotiations and making 6-figure decisions. Maria had gotten promoted twice. David was leading the African expansion. Others were thriving in ways their previous employers had never imagined. That mattered more than any contract. In May, Arya took Sophie and Caleb to visit her father again. This time, Sophie wasn't scared. She sat beside the wheelchair and told Mr. Bennett about her school and her friends and the book she was reading. Your daughter is really smart, Sophie told him seriously. She runs a whole company, and she still has time to help with my homework. That's impressive. Arya's eyes filled with tears. Caleb reached over and took her hand. On the drive back, Sophie asked when they were going to move in together. Who said we're moving in together? Caleb asked. You're together all the time anyway. Seems silly to have 2 apartments. It's complicated, Sophie. Adults always say that. Arya laughed. She's right, though. We should discuss it. So they did. That night, after Sophie went to bed, sitting on Arya's balcony overlooking Manhattan. My place is too small, Caleb said. Your place is too big. We could find something in between. With good schools nearby for Sophie. An office space for both of us to work from home sometimes. This is crazy. We've only been officially together for 5 months. I know. Arya smiled. But when you know, right? Caleb thought about Emma, about the years they'd dated before getting married, doing everything in the proper order, following the expected timeline. It hadn't protected them, hadn't changed the outcome. Sometimes careful planning didn't matter. Sometimes you just had to trust. Okay, he said. Let's do it. They found a place in July. Brownstone in Brooklyn, 3 bedrooms, yard for Sophie to play in. Expensive but manageable with their combined salaries. They moved in August, Sophie directing the placement of furniture with the authority of a general commanding troops. This is my room, and it's bigger than the old one, and I can have friends sleep over now, she announced to anyone who would listen. The first night in the new house, they ordered pizza and ate sitting on the floor because the dining table hadn't been delivered yet. Sophie fell asleep on the couch, exhausted from unpacking. Caleb carried her upstairs to her new room, tucking her in carefully. When he came back down, Arya was on the back porch looking at the small yard. "I never thought I'd have this," she said quietly. "What?" "Normal. A house. A family. I thought I'd always be the person married to work, too busy or too damaged to build anything else." Caleb joined her on the porch. "You're not damaged. Neither are you, but we both are, a little. That's okay, though. We fit anyway." "We do." They stood together looking at the yard, the sky, the life they were building. Somewhere in the distance, the city hummed. But here, in this small pocket of Brooklyn, there was quiet. Sophie started second grade in September, made new friends immediately, adapted to the new school with the resilience of children. She joined art club and soccer, activities Caleb could finally afford without stress. Bennett Global thrived. The international division expanded to 20 employees, then 30. Caleb hired people who reminded him of himself, overlooked, underestimated, carrying skills the world hadn't valued. He built a department that operated on the belief that different perspectives weren't just valuable, they were essential. In October, a year after that first night in the conference room, Caleb was invited to speak at a business conference about international strategy. He almost declined. Public speaking terrified him, but Arya convinced him. "You have things to say that people need to hear." So he spoke. Told his story without embellishment, janitor to advisor, grief to purpose. The audience was silent, then erupted in applause. Afterward, a young woman approached him. "I work in hospitality. I speak 4 languages. No one takes me seriously because I didn't go to college. Your speech gave me hope." "Apply to Bennett Global," Caleb said. "We're always hiring people who actually know what they're doing." She did. They hired her. In November, Sophie asked if Arya was going to be her stepmom. They were decorating for Thanksgiving, their first major holiday in the new house. Sophie was hanging paper turkeys she'd made at school. "Would you want that?" Arya asked carefully. "I don't know. Maybe. What would it mean?" "It would mean Arya and I got married, that she'd legally be part of our family." "Is she already part of our family?" "Yes." "Then why do you need legal?" Caleb and Arya looked at each other. "That," Arya said, "is an excellent question." They discussed it that night after Sophie went to bed. Neither of them cared about traditional timelines or societal expectations. They'd already built a life together. Marriage felt both unnecessary and inevitable. "I want to," Arya said, "not because we're supposed to, but because I want everyone to know this is permanent, that I choose you and Sophie every day." "I want to also, for the same reasons." "So we're getting married." "Apparently we're getting married," they told Sophie the next morning. She considered it seriously. "Can I help plan the wedding?" "Absolutely." "And can I wear a fancy dress?" "The fanciest." "Okay, I approve." They married in January, small ceremony, just close friends and Sophie. No elaborate production, no stress about impressing people. Just vows exchanged in their living room with Sophie standing between them, holding both their hands. "I promise to love you," Caleb said to Arya. "To support your dreams even when they terrify me. To be honest, even when it's uncomfortable. To build a life with you that makes space for all of us." "I promise to love you," Arya said. "To value your perspective even when it challenges mine. To protect this family we've built. To never take for granted the gift of being chosen." Sophie cleared her throat. "I also have promises." They looked at her surprised. "I promise to be good most of the time," Sophie said seriously, "and to tell you when I'm not being good, and to love you both even when you're being annoying." The officiant laughed. "Those are excellent promises." After the ceremony, they had dinner with their small gathering of people. Maria and her boyfriend, David and his family, Claire, who'd become a friend somewhere along the way, a few others who'd witnessed this unlikely story unfold. Later, after everyone left, the 3 of them sat in the living room. Sophie had changed out of her fancy dress, but refused to take off the flower crown she'd insisted on wearing. "Are we a real family now?" she asked. "We were a real family before," Caleb said. "The wedding just made it official." "Oh," Sophie thought about this. "Then what changes?" "Nothing," Arya said, "and everything. We keep being exactly who we are, but now we've promised to keep choosing each other, even when things get hard. Things are already hard sometimes. I know. That's why the promise matters. Sophie nodded, satisfied. Can I watch TV before bed? One show. She ran off, flower crown bouncing. Caleb and Arya sat together on the couch, listening to the sounds of their house. TV from Sophie's room, the heater clicking on, street noise filtering through windows. I can't believe we did this, Arya said. Having regrets already? No, the opposite. I can't believe we almost didn't. Can't believe I almost fired you to save my reputation. Can't believe we almost let fear win. Caleb thought about that night a year ago. The conference room. The choice to speak up when staying silent would have been safer. The 1,000 small choices since then that had built this life. I spent years running from everything that scared me, he said quietly. After Emma died, fear became my compass. If something terrified me, I avoided it. If something might hurt, I left before it could. I built a whole life around staying safe. And then you walked into a conference room full of billionaires and exposed corporate fraud. And then I did that. He smiled. I don't know what changed. Maybe nothing changed. Maybe I was just tired of being afraid. I'm glad you were. Me too. They sat in comfortable silence. Outside, Brooklyn moved through its evening rhythms. Inside, Sophie laughed at something on TV, the sound carrying through the house. This was what mattered. Not the company or the titles or the success. This, family, home. The choice to stay when leaving would have been easier. Caleb thought about Emma sometimes. Wondered what she'd think of the life he'd built. The daughter he'd finally learned to parent. The woman he'd chosen to love. The career that had found him instead of the other way around. He hoped she'd be proud. Thought maybe she would be. But more than that, he was proud. Of himself. Of Sophie. Of Arya. Of everything they'd survived to get here. The world hadn't gotten easier. Bills still came. Work still challenged them. Sophie still had hard days. Arya still fought battles at the company. Life remained complicated and messy and imperfect. But they faced it together. And that made all the difference. Sophie appeared in the doorway, ready for bed. Will you read me a story? Of course. They went upstairs together, all three of them, and read about dragons and princesses and characters who were brave despite being scared. Sophie fell asleep halfway through, but they finished the story anyway. Later, Caleb stood in the doorway watching his daughter sleep. Arya joined him, slipping her hand into his. You're a good father, she whispered. I'm trying. You're more than trying. You're succeeding. They went to their own room, crawled into bed exhausted and content. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new negotiations, new crises. The world wouldn't stop demanding things from them. But tonight, they had this. Each other. Their daughter sleeping safely down the hall. A home that felt earned rather than borrowed. Caleb had spent years believing survival was enough. That keeping Sophie fed and housed and alive was the best he could manage. That happiness was a luxury for other people. People who hadn't lost everything. People who knew how to live instead of just endure. He'd been wrong. Survival was necessary. But it wasn't sufficient. Life required more than just continuing forward. It required the courage to build something, even when building meant risking loss. It required choosing hope when fear felt safer. It required believing that broken things could heal without becoming what they were before. He wasn't the same person he'd been when Emma died. Wasn't even the same person who'd walked into that conference room a year ago. Loss had changed him. Grief had reshaped him. But so had love, so had Sophie, so had Arya, so had the choice to stop running and finally stand still. What are you thinking about? Arya asked in the darkness. How lucky I am. Luck had nothing to do with it. You worked for this. We worked for this. Fair. They lay together in the quiet house, and Caleb felt something he hadn't felt in years. Not happiness exactly. That felt too simple. Not contentment either. That felt too passive. Peace. That was it. The kind that came not from the absence of struggle, but from knowing you could handle whatever came next. The kind that came from being seen completely, flaws and failures and all, and chosen anyway. This was enough. This was everything. This was home. And for Caleb Ward, who'd spent so long running from home, finally staying felt like the bravest thing he'd ever done.